Welcome, traveler, to AI Lovecraft After Dark, a journey beyond the fragile veil of reality, where shadows twist, sanity frays, and forgotten horrors slumber beneath starlit skies. Tonight, let artificial intelligence be your guide, as it summons tales of eldritch dread, ancient mysteries, and cosmic terror born from the abyssal realms of imagination itself. Draw your curtains, dim your lights, and prepare to wander through labyrinthine nightmares conjured in the spirit of H.P. Lovecraft. For the next 3 hours, abandon hope for comfort or understanding. Here in the darkness, the unknown whispers, and it is hungry. If you enjoy the following stories, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know what you think. Now let's get into the first story. The Sleeper in the Ice. I write these words by the dim light of a failing lamp, hands trembling with a dread that no amount of reason can dispel. In the weeks since my return from the polar expedition, sleep has been a fitful stranger. When it comes, it brings dreams of cyclopean ruins and an unnameable presence stirring beneath endless fields of ice. Though modern science and common sense urge me to dismiss these nightmares as the lingering trauma of extreme isolation, I know in the depths of my soul that what we witnessed in that remote wasteland was no mere hallucination. I commit our tale to paper, not to entertain, but to rid myself of its festering hold on my psyche, and to warn others. There are blasphemous truths in this world that mortals are not meant to discover. It began in the austral summer of 2025. Our team, a cadre of intrepid scientists and adventurers, had set forth to a bleak, unexplored plateau deep in Antarctica, beyond even the recorded routes of legendary explorers. Our party consisted of 5, Dr. Elias Harding, the geologist and nominal leader, myself, a climatologist by trade, an antiquarian by inclination, Marina Wilkes, a young archaeologist drawn to any whisper of ancient myth, Captain Jonathan Miles, a veteran polar explorer and survival expert, and Dr. Viktor Sakharov, a biologist whose stoic demeanor bellied a deep curiosity. We arrived at the edge of the world, with great hope and mounting curiosity. Little did we suspect the abnormal horrors awaiting us beneath the sun-glittered ice. From that moment, our small, ski-equipped plane left us at the designated drop-off point and vanished into the sky. An unnatural hush fell upon our surroundings. The polar day shone bright with an alien purity, the sun skimming the horizon in an eternal twilight, yet an indescribable sense of nightmarish gloom settled on our camp. Miles, toughened by countless expeditions, remarked that he had never felt such a premonition of menace in all his years amid the polar gales. We busied ourselves unloading supplies and assembling our communication tent, complete with a satellite transmitter and long-range radio, hoping to chase away the nameless anxiety through work. But even as we labored, I caught Dr. Sakharov standing still, his head tilted as if listening to something just beyond hearing. When I inquired, he started and forced a chuckle, blaming the wind. I heard nothing then, but the incident left a subtle chill that the bright sun could not thaw. Our trek inland toward the anomalous site spanned a week of travel across desolate ice flats and treacherous crevasses. Each day the global positioning device confirmed we were drawing nearer to the coordinates that had piqued our interest. As we advanced, the weather grew increasingly erratic. Days of eerie calm, when the expanse was deathly silent and the crunch of our boots on crystalline snow seemed uncannily loud, were punctuated by sudden squalls of razor-like wind that appeared without warning. On the 3rd day, we witnessed a phenomenon none of us could explain, an aurora in broad daylight. The sky, though sunlit, became streaked with ribbons of pale greenish luminescence, twisting and coiling like the ghost of some primordial serpent. Marina gasped at the sight, fumbling for her camera. Captain Miles merely muttered about magnetic anomalies. I recall an irrational certainty that those lights were no mere solar wind, but a wordless warning etched across the firmament. That night, as we huddled in our tents, the sun finally dipping under the horizon for a few hours of fitful dusk, I could not shake the image of those sinuous lights, and I wondered if they were dancing in answer to something unseen far below. On the 5th day, we arrived at the edge of a vast glacial plain flanked by ice-blasted mountains. According to our instruments, the source of the geometric patterns lay directly beneath the center of that windswept plain. With portable drills and a ground-penetrating radar device, we began our survey. Almost immediately, our suspicions were confirmed. There was something solid below, far too regular to be a natural formation. Buried roughly 30 feet under the accumulated snows and ice was a structure, stonework. Excitement overcame our fatigue as we worked in shifts to bore a narrow shaft and carefully excavate around it. What emerged from the frozen matrix was the top of a stone archway, clearly artificial and carved with intricate markings. Dr. Harding and Marina were beside themselves with scholarly glee, brushing away ice crystals to reveal chiseled symbols, unlike any alphabet known to modern epigraphy. The archway's stone was of a peculiar blackish-green hue, hideously smooth to the touch despite its obvious age. How could such an edifice exist here, entombed in polar ice where no human civilization had ever taken root? By the 7th day, we had widened the opening enough for a person to descend. Beyond the arch, our lanterns and LED beams revealed a carved tunnel sloping gently downward into the glacier's heart. We decided to make camp and venture inside the following morning, allowing time to catalog our find and attempt to send a preliminary report to the outside world. To our frustration, the satellite uplink, our only tether to civilization, malfunctioned inexplicably that evening. The device, which had worked flawlessly a day prior, now only emitted static. Miles attempted to radio our base camp, but the signal was distorted by a strange interference, a low, humming undertone that set our teeth on edge. Dr. Sakharov hypothesized solar flares or magnetic disturbances from the local anomaly. Privately, I felt a gnawing dread that perhaps the very act of uncovering the ruin had triggered some transmission or curse that sought to isolate us. We had provisions for weeks and confidence in our abilities, however, so we agreed to press onward, planning to troubleshoot communications after exploring the tunnel. That night, sleep eluded many of us. In my tent, I drifted in and out of a shallow, uneasy slumber, only to jolt awake at what I thought were voices carried on the polar wind. Straining to listen, I heard nothing distinct, only the low groan of ice shifting in the distance. Yet the impression remained that something out there called to us, in tones too low for conscious hearing. Toward midnight, I finally plunged into a deeper sleep, and with it came the first dream, if dream it truly was, of that accursed place. I found myself standing in a colossal vaulted hall of stone, lit by a flickering bluish glow from no visible source. The architecture was of a scale and style that defied sanity. Towering columns carved with twisting decadent bas-reliefs of grotesque alien beings, and walls that curved at impossible angles, as if Euclidean geometry had been cast aside. The air was heavy and ancient. As I stepped forward, the floor seemed to ripple under my feet, and the carvings on the walls appeared to writhe, almost alive. Upon the far wall, I beheld a massive symbol, a design like a great circle or wheel, etched deeper than the rest. Unintelligible glyphs swarmed around it in concentric rings. Standing before this monolithic sign was a vague silhouette of a figure, or perhaps a statue. It was draped in what looked like flowing folds of darkness, impossibly tall, and facing the symbol in reverence. I sensed at once that I was intruding upon a blasphemous ritual older than mankind. An overwhelming dread seized me as the figure began to turn in my direction. I could not discern its face, only the hint of a hideous visage coming into view, something not meant for human eyes. I awoke at that moment with a scream on my lips, and cold sweat clinging to my skin. My shout roused the others. Marina and Victor admitted they too had unsettling dreams, though not as vivid as mine. Marina dreamt of distant whispers, and a feeling of drowning in black water beneath miles of ice, while Victor, normally stolid, said he kept seeing the archway in his mind, coupled with an inexplicable certainty that it was hungry for us. These confessions shook us almost as much as the dreams themselves. As logical scientists, we groped for rationalizations. Perhaps the electromagnetic environment was affecting our subconscious, or it was simply the byproduct of anxiety and excitement. Dr. Harding and Miles exchanged worried glances, but urged that in the morning we proceed with caution and document everything. No one voiced the fear growing in our hearts that something in the nameless ruin itself was touching our minds. Morning, if one could call the gray twilight of polar summer morning, came, and we prepared to descend into the opening. We equipped ourselves with portable lights, cameras, sampling tools, and rope. Captain Miles insisted on carrying a firearm, a modern rifle, though he half joked that it was more likely to be needed against polar bears, an absurdity at these latitudes, than anything we might find in a dusty cavern. In truth, none of us knew what to expect. Perhaps fragile artifacts of a bygone era, or the fossilized remains of some prehistoric animal. The air emanating from the passage was astonishingly dry, and not as bitterly cold as one would imagine. It had a stagnant, ancient quality, as though it had lain undisturbed for millennia. One by one we climbed down through the archway, leaving the world of familiar daylight and biting wind behind. What we found inside defies full description, for our eyes were the first human eyes to behold it, and our language strained to capture its forbidden marvels. The tunnel walls were adorned with the same unknown glyphs, some faintly luminescent due to either age-old phosphorescence or a property of the stone itself. Our lights revealed that the passage opened into an enormous chamber carved from the bedrock below the ice. This subterranean hall was exactly as I had glimpsed in my dream. Cyclopean pillars stretched upward to a ceiling lost in darkness, and the dimensions of the place were staggering, far larger than the nave of any cathedral, more expansive than any natural cave. We realized with a mix of awe and dread that an entire ancient edifice lay hidden here, preserved in the eternal cold. As we cautiously moved further in, our footsteps echoed in the vastness. We began to make out shapes of structures within the hall, suggestions of buildings or altars arranged in rows along a main thoroughfare, and archways leading off into deeper darkness. It was as though we stood in the town square of a buried city. All surfaces bore that bizarre iconography of coiling signs and half-familiar motifs. Here and there I thought I recognized stylized forms, perhaps eyes, tentacles, or insectoid wings, incorporated into the swirling patterns. The very layout of the place seemed to follow a logic all of its own, evoking a sense of unease and disorientation. Marina gasped as she discovered a series of carvings on a wall that looked unmistakably like star constellations. Incredibly, she pointed out one cluster that resembled the Pleiades, and another carving that might have depicted the Earth with its moon. If her observations were correct, it hinted that whoever built this place possessed knowledge of astronomy far beyond that of known ancient cultures. Dr. Harding was fervently photographing and sketching, his breath fogging the frigid air as he muttered about rewriting the annals of history. I saw his eyes shine with academic delight behind his frosted spectacles. For a moment, scholarly wonder outshone fear. We set about collecting careful samples of stone and any lichenous growth on the walls, working methodically despite the adrenaline in our veins. Victor examined something that appeared to be a depiction of a bizarre plant or coral, unlike any life form we knew. Captain Miles remained near the tunnel entry, his posture tense and alert, as if guarding against some unseen threat. It was Marina who discovered the first actual text beyond the repetitive glyphs. A large stone dais at the center of the hall bore a series of elaborate pictograms and strange characters, arranged in concentric rings around a shallow depression that looked like a basin or altar. In that basin rested a kind of relic, a tablet or slab about the size of a large book, made of the same smooth, dark stone as the archway. Its surface was covered in finely carved inscriptions. With trembling hands, Marina and Dr. Harding lifted the tablet from its resting place. Unlike the weathered walls, the markings on this object were sharply defined, as if etched only yesterday. We scarcely dared hope to decipher it, but Marina proficient in several ancient languages, and Harding began to examine it with intense focus, hoping to find patterns or similarities to known scripts. The rest of us fanned out a little, our flashlight beams probing the shadowy edges of the chamber, simultaneously trying to take in every marvel and watch for any movement in the gloom. I found myself drawn again to that far wall with the great circular symbol, just as in my dream. Approaching it with both fascination and dread, I raised my flashlight to inspect it closely. The circle was indeed carved deeply into the stone, and the smaller glyphs around it seemed to dance in the play of light and shadow. At the center of the circle was an indented hollow, perhaps where some object had once been affixed. A disquieting thought struck me. Could this be some kind of seal or lock, meant to hold something in or out? The notion made my skin crawl beneath my layers of cold weather gear. I recalled the robed figure from my vision, and almost expected to find some evidence of it here, but saw only the carved stone. I pressed my gloved hand against the central hollow, and for a fleeting second I fancied I felt a slight vibration, though it may have been only the pounding of my own pulse. A sudden hiss of indrawn breath from behind me snapped me out of my reverie. It was Dr. Harding. He and Marina had been poring over the tablet, and Harding's face was now drained of color, his eyes wide in disbelief behind his glasses. "This isn't just a historical record," he whispered. "It reads almost like a warning, or an invocation." Marina looked up as well, her expression alarmed. She showed us a particular sequence of the angular symbols on the tablet that she believed corresponded to the large circular sigil on the wall. "It might be a name or title," she suggested nervously. She attempted to sound it out, tongue stumbling over alien syllables. Thalchak, or Thalachak? The pronunciation was uncertain, the language unlike anything we had heard. A chill ran through me despite the still air. Marina continued in a halting voice. "I think it speaks of something bound or sleeping, something that should not be disturbed." A heavy silence fell upon us, broken only by the distant drip of meltwater and our own anxious breathing. In that moment, each of us felt the same instinct. We were trespassers in a place no living beings ought to tread. Captain Miles cleared his throat, his voice echoing to the vaults above. "We have seen enough. This place, whatever it is, it's dangerous. Let's head back to the surface and regroup." No one protested. As much as it pained Dr. Harding to leave this archaeological treasure, even he was visibly shaken. We packed up what we could, Harding carefully wrapping the stone tablet in a protective case, unwilling to leave this key to the mystery behind, and we began to retrace our steps toward the entrance. Fate, however, had other plans. As we turned our backs to the chamber, a deep rumble reverberated through the subterranean air. The stone floor trembled under our boots. Dust and tiny ice crystals rained down from the unseen ceiling. It was as if some giant thing had stirred from slumber. From the darkness of one of the side passages came a sound that raised every hair on my body. A wet, shuffling scuttle, accompanied by a high-pitched chittering. The very echoes seemed alive with movement. "Go now!" Miles barked, snapping us out of our shock. We broke into a panicked run toward the archway and our rope, our flashlight beams swinging wildly across walls inscribed with horrors. A chorus of shrill shrieks erupted behind us, multitudes it seemed, coming from every direction as the unseen things in the dark reacted to our flight. I glimpsed a flicker of motion to my left, something pale and sinuous slithering behind a column, and to my right I caught the glint of light on what looked like an eye. Terror lent us wings. Miles was at the rear, and seeing shapes closing in, he turned and fired his rifle into the darkness. The gunshot cracked like thunder in the enclosed space, its flash illuminating a tableau of nightmares for just an instant. I saw at least two squamous, pale shapes recoil from the light, limbs or appendages withdrawing behind a block of stone. Whether they were animals, insects, or something far worse, I cannot say, but their mere outline was enough to flood my mind with indescribable loathing. An eldritch, burbling howl echoed in answer to the shot, deafening in the confined stone corridor. The tunnel ahead of us seemed to ripple with shadows. My heart pounded as I scrambled up the rope, fingers nearly frozen, yet desperately gripping. One by one we hauled ourselves through the archway into the open air, gasping in the sudden blast of cold wind on our faces. Captain Miles was the last to emerge, climbing out while keeping his rifle trained downward. The moment he was clear, he shouted, "Blow it! Blow it now!" Earlier in the expedition, we had brought small demolition charges for the purpose of collecting ice cores and rock samples. With trembling hands, Miles and Harding set one of these charges at the tunnel mouth, hastily wedging it by the partially collapsed arch. We all stumbled across the slick ice as Miles thumbed the detonator. A concussive blast tore through the entrance with a gout of pulverized ice and ancient stone. The ground shuddered and a section of the glacier's edge collapsed, sealing the tunnel under countless tons of debris. A cloud of snow billowed upward, and then all was quiet once more. For a brief moment we stood there in the swirling snow, hearts hammering, hardly able to believe we were alive. Relief warred with lingering terror. We had escaped the subterranean nightmare and entombed whatever lurked within. Dr. Harding sagged to his knees, either in exhaustion or gratitude, and Marina was openly weeping. Whether from relief or shock, I could not tell. But our ordeal was far from over. Nature itself, or some force allied with the horror beneath, was about to exact its own price. The sky had darkened unnaturally fast. In the short time we had been below, a heavy bank of leaden clouds had rolled in overhead. The mild calm of the morning was replaced by a screaming wind. Fine needles of ice whipped at our faces. We knew we had to move. We grabbed what supplies we could carry and left the rest of the storm, hastily securing the precious tablet in a padded pack on Harding's back. Our plan was to fall back to the last camp, where a sturdier shelter and additional supplies awaited, only a few miles away across the glacier. The trek back was a waking nightmare. The flat expanse that had been easy to navigate hours before was now an alien landscape of whirling white. A ferocious blizzard engulfed us, reducing visibility to a few feet. We roped ourselves together to avoid becoming separated in the featureless void. The wind came in howling gusts that threatened to knock us off our feet, and the temperature plummeted with each passing minute. I was half blind, ice coating my goggles, but I sensed an uncanny quality to this storm, as if it were more than a clash of air masses, as if some malevolent will drove it. The very ice beneath us groaned and cracked at times, making it clear that to stop was to die. I remember shouting to keep moving, though the words whipped away unheard. Above the roar of the elements, I fancied I heard a different sound, a deep, rhythmic vibration, almost below the threshold of hearing, that pulsed in the air and in my chest. It reminded me eerily of the humming interference on our radio earlier, now magnified and woven into the wind itself. Marina suddenly cried out and pointed behind us, her voice thin against the storm. I glanced back, straining to see through the swirling snow. A strange light glimmered in the distance behind us, near where the ruins lay buried. At first I thought it might be the glow of the distant aurora again, but this was different, concentrated, purposeful. The lights, a ghastly bluish-green, swirled and coalesced, rising up like a vortex or column within the blizzard. With dawning horror, I realized the storm clouds above were glowing, illuminated from below by this uncanny radiance. For one insane moment I hoped it was an illusion of refracted moonlight or St. Elmo's fire, but as the luminescence gathered form, that hope died. The swirling glow took on the outline of something immense and indescribable, a towering silhouette in the heart of the maelstrom, vaguely humanoid, yet shifting and unstable, as if the very storm was given conscious shape. Pale ribbons of light extended from its core, like tentacular arms, whipping and stretching through the sky. Victor saw it too and began to scream, a high, keening wail of mindless terror that cut through the air. "It's coming!" he shrieked, his voice breaking. In that moment, all pretense of rationality left us. Panic seized our group as firmly as the cold. We ran. We ran as if all the devils of hell were at our heels, the rope that bound us together now a lifeline keeping us from scattering like the leaves in the gale. Snow stung my face and the ground swayed beneath my stumbling feet. I heard Marina sobbing prayers, and I realized with horror that the rope had gone slack on one end. Dr. Sakharov, who had been last in line, was no longer attached. I caught a glimpse of him standing motionless some 30 yards behind, outlined against the phosphorescent haze. He had unfastened his harness and stood transfixed, head tilted back as if in a trance, gazing up at the towering apparition bearing down on him. I cried out his name and instinctively tried to rush back to him, but Miles yanked me forward with a painful jerk. "He's gone!" the captain roared, his voice nearly drowned by the wind. I could only watch in helpless anguish as the glowing column of stormlight enveloped Victor. One of those extensions of light lashed downward with impossible speed, striking him. There was a flash of sickly green and a thunderous crack that I could feel in my teeth. When the snow eddies cleared a moment later, Victor was simply gone. Only a burst of dark debris stained the snow where he had stood. Whether it was blood, ash, or something else, I could not tell. No human mind could fully process the insane reality of what we had witnessed. We stumbled onward, half dragged by the relentless miles. Marina's cries had turned to quiet, gasping sobs, and I wondered if her mind was verging on collapse. Dr. Harding pressed on in stoic silence, but I saw a madman in his eyes as he clutched the strapped pack with the tablet as if it were the only thing real. Behind us, the entity moved inexorably, not so much pursuing as hurting us in our flight. Now and then I dared a glance backward. I saw that glow shifting through the swirling snow, at times seemingly dispersing into the storm, only to recongeal closer to us. The wind carried eerie sounds, snatches of an ululating howl and a cacophony of other noises that might have been laughter or the wailing of damned souls. At one point, through a brief gap in the blizzard, I thought I saw smaller shapes capering around the edges of the great luminous column. Perhaps the very creatures we'd encountered below, now swarming across the ice in the wake of their master. My senses threatened to buckle under the weight of that nightmare. At long last, half dead with cold and terror, we reached the site of our last camp, a blessed memory of human endeavor in the midst of this chaos. The sled and supplies we left were covered in drifted snow, but the tall poles of our canvas storage tent still stood, a silhouette against the gray void. By some fortune, the tent had not blown away. We tumbled inside, hauling the semi-conscious Marina with us, and hastily fastened the flap. In that tenuous shelter, with canvas walls shuddering around us, we 4 survivors stared at one another in shock. Our frosted faces, drawn and hollow-eyed, must have each reflected the same disbelief and dawning madness. Miles fumbled with the radio transmitter, his hands shaking violently from the cold and dread. Static greeted us, but then, miraculously, a burst of a clear signal cut through. The storm's interference had lessened, or the device had simply decided to grant us this mercy. He began to broadcast a distress call, shouting our coordinates and situation into the microphone, repeating our plea for immediate evacuation. I could not tell if anyone heard us, but the act of calling out gave us a glimmer of hope. While Miles wrestled with the radio, I turned to Dr. Harding, who sat hunched and rocking slightly, hugging the pack with the stone tablet to his chest. I gently touched his shoulder, and he looked at me with eyes that struggled to focus. He was murmuring to himself. As I leaned in, I caught fragments of what he was saying, and a chill deeper than the polar cold ran through me. He was reciting parts of the tablet's translation, broken phrases we had heard earlier. "The sleeper in the ice, the devourer of stars," he mumbled, lips bluish and trembling. "Bound by the 5 seals. Under the sky burns green. We broke it. We broke the first seal." His voice hitched on a sob or a laugh. I could not tell which. "We broke it. And now. Before I could attempt to arouse him from this stupor, a tremendous impact shook the earth. The ground bucked, knocking us against the metal frame of the tent. A sound followed that I will never forget. A multi-layered roar, as if 1,000 icebergs were cracking and collapsing at once, underlain by a monstrous, droning bellow that resonated in our bones. The sleeper, the thing we had awakened, was wrathful, and the very land responded to its fury. Miles dropped the radio and shouted, "We have to signal them now, if they're coming!" Through a gap torn in the tent's fabric, I saw an eerie green glow intensify outside. The captain grabbed a flare gun from our emergency kit. Despite our protests, he staggered out into the howling storm to fire a last desperate signal into the heavens. Marina and I crouched by the rent in the tent, peering out into the chaos. We saw Miles as a dim figure bracing himself against the wind. He fired a flare. A brilliant crimson arc cut through the sky, illuminating the swirling snow with hellish red light. For a few heartbeats, the blizzard thinned and we saw it, truly saw it, in all its blasphemous glory. It loomed above the camp not 100 yards away, a towering column of darkness and light given form. In the blood-red illumination of the flare, the entity's shape was drawn into stark relief. It was vaguely humanoid, but stretched and distorted to colossal proportions, a giant outlined by cracking auroral fire. Its body was composed of swirling storm cloud and radiant vapor, a vaguely translucent mass through which veins of ghostly light pulsed. Two immense arms hung at its sides, tapering into finger-like tendrils that merged with the boiling clouds. Where a head might be, there was a shapeless confluence of shadow and light, and within that murk I saw, or imagined I saw, two burning eyes, the only solid things in that writhing form, huge, lidless orbs of greenish luminescence that cast their malignant gaze upon us. Around the entity's head and shoulders writhed a halo of smaller appendages, or feelers, each one crackling with energy and shifting in and out of corporeality. Its outline seemed to warp the air around it, as if even reality recoiled from its presence. The sight drove a dagger of primal fear into my heart. Marina let out a whimpering moan, and I realized I had stopped breathing. In the next instant, the flare's descent ended, and darkness swept back in like a tide. We lost sight of the monster, but a moment later came a stricken cry from Miles. It was a sound of ultimate agony and despair, cut brutally short. I thought I saw, in the brief flare afterglow, the captain's figure being hurled into the air like a rag doll. Then there was nothing but the raging night and the ever-deepening cold. We were alone with the thing, 3 frail humans against a force beyond comprehension. The tent ripped open fully, and the supporting poles snapped like twigs as an unseen power descended upon us. The last feeble barrier between us and the void was gone. I was flung backward into the snow, the breath knocked from my lungs. I could barely make out Marina's form and the thrashing silhouette of Dr. Harding entangled in canvas. One of the tent poles struck my leg, and I felt a sharp pain. Perhaps it broke, but in that adrenaline-soaked moment, I barely registered it. A colossal shape loomed through the blizzard right above us. My skin prickled and my ears popped as if the air pressure had plummeted, and a nauseating vibration filled the air. Marina was beside me, and I grabbed her hand, both of us cowering as that presence bore down. Dr. Harding's voice rose in a sudden, inhuman shriek of terror somewhere to our right. I turned in time to see him being lifted off the ground, wrapped in what looked like a tendril of pale light. His scream curdled into a ghastly, gargling wail as he and the pack with the tablet were swept upward into the swirling darkness. There was a wet snapping noise, loud even over the storm, and his scream cut off instantly. A shower of red droplets spattered across the snow and on our faces. In that moment, a strange and merciful numbness overtook me, whether from shock, injury, or some unintended pity from the thing in the storm. I found I could move again. With strength I did not know I had, I pulled Marina to her feet. She was sobbing and babbling incoherently, eyes unfocused. The nightmarish figure of the cosmic horror was shifting, perhaps distracted with the gruesome remains of Harding. I seized the opportunity. Half dragging, half carrying Marina, I bolted away from that ruined camp into the darkness, moving purely on desperation and instinct. The wind was at our backs now, almost propelling us forward as we limped and staggered over the ice and snow. Behind us rose a cacophony of sounds, roars, crackling energy, and a screech that might have been the frustration of a thwarted predator. I expected each second to feel a burning grasp on my shoulders, or a bolt of impossible force through my back, but we kept running, stumbling, crawling when we fell, then getting up again. I recall glimpses of that mad flight, the world reduced to an endless expanse of night and snow, with the monstrous glow slowly receding behind us. Time lost meaning. It seemed we fled for hours, though it could not have been more than a few minutes. Once I dared to look over my shoulder and saw the entity, now a distant pillar of light and shadow amid the gale, seemingly halted. Perhaps it was bound to the vicinity of its city and could not roam further, or perhaps it simply chose not to give chase beyond a certain point. Its glowing eyes, or were they stars in the sky? My memory falters, burned through the darkness one last time, then faded as the howling wind carried us far, far away. At some point, exhaustion and cold took their toll, and my mind mercifully blacked out. Marina and I were found 2 days later by a search and rescue team, nearly 50 miles from the dig site. Against all odds, we had survived and wandered far enough to intercept a survey plane's path. We were huddled behind an outcrop of ice, half buried in snow. I was still clinging to Marina, having wrapped both of us in a torn piece of canvas for warmth. The rescuers said I was raving and delirious. Apparently, I kept insisting that they turn off the lights and stop the whispering, though there were no such things to be heard or seen. They airlifted us to the main Antarctic base, where we slowly recovered from frostbite and shock. Marina remained unconscious for most of the rescue and her subsequent fever delirium, but I was awake enough to learn that our emergency radio call had been picked up. Captain Miles' flare had also been spotted faintly in the distance by a satellite, which helped them triangulate our location in that endless white. Of Dr. Harding, Captain Miles, and Dr. Sakharov, no trace was ever found. The official report lists them as victims of a catastrophic storm and a crevasse accident. A search of the area after the weather calmed revealed a massive ice collapse where our camp had been, consistent with an avalanche or glacial quake. All that remained was a jumbled field of ice boulders and snow. Of our equipment, only a few twisted metal tools and fragments of the tents were recovered. The rescuers noted odd readings on their instruments, minor magnetic fluctuations, and radio interference, but these were attributed to the aftermath of the storm. Our accounts of what truly happened were met with sympathetic nods and assurances that hallucinations are common in extreme conditions. In the end, even I found it easier to nod in weak agreement than to press the issue. How could we ever make them believe? Back in the warmth and safety of civilization, the events on the ice might have begun to feel unreal, like a distant nightmare, except that I cannot escape the truth of what I experienced. Every night, sleep brings me back to that accursed city beneath the ice, and the horror we unwittingly unleashed. I see again the titanic shadow swirling in the freezing sky, and I hear the echo of that alien shriek. I see Victor's face frozen in terror, Harding's final, awful ascent into the darkness, and Miles' final stand with flare in hand. These images do not fade with time. If anything, they grow more vivid, etched by a mind that cannot forget. I have in my possession the one piece of physical evidence of our ordeal, the stone tablet that Dr. Harding so zealously preserved, the same that we suspect played a role in breaking the creature's seal. Unbeknownst to the rescue team, I recovered it from the snow before we were found. It now lies wrapped in cloth in an old sea chest in my study, alongside Harding's tattered notebook. On quiet nights I fancy I can hear a faint vibration or humming emanating from that chest, as though the relic still resonates with the power that once held the sleeper imprisoned. I have not dared show it to any expert or authority, for fear of what attention it might draw or what further harm it might cause. Instead, I have taken it upon myself to continue deciphering its dread message using Harding's notes and every resource I can secretly gather. Perhaps it is an act of penance or obsession, or the last shred of hope I cling to, that I might find some way to undo what we have done. What little I have managed to translate chills me more than the memories of that night. The tablet's writings speak of an entity not born of Earth, a conqueror from the stars who fell to our world in ancient times. The denizens of the polar city, whether they were an early offshoot of humanity or an entirely non-human race, worshipped this being as a god even as it threatened to destroy them. They called it by titles that translate roughly to Eater of Light and the Sleeper in the Ice. It took a great revolt or ritual, my understanding is unclear which, to finally imprison the being. They bound it beneath the ice with spells or technologies indistinguishable from magic, locking it away with a series of seals. The tablet itself appears to be one such seal, a final lock meant to ensure the thing would never break free. Their warnings were explicit, that any who disturb this prison risk unleashing a doom beyond all reckoning. We, in our ignorance, ignored those ancient warnings. We pierced the seal when we removed the tablet and shattered the sanctity of that place. I fear that what we experienced was only the beginning, the first stirring of a monster that has yet to fully awaken. The text suggests that only one seal was broken that day. Others may still remain intact deeper in the catacombs, or perhaps at other sites around the globe. Unless those remaining bonds hold, it is only a matter of time before the sleeper fully rises. Whether it requires certain celestial alignments or the lifeblood of more intruders, I cannot say, but the prospect fills me with unspeakable dread. Should that horror emerge unimpeded into our world, I have no doubt it would mean the end of human civilization, if not the end of humanity itself. How could we stand against a being that turns storm winds and auroras into its servants, that moves through the sky as easily as a fish through water? We would be as ants before a god of wrath and madness. I finish this account with a heavy heart and a soul burdened by guilt. What answer can I give to the families of my lost friends? That they died unleashing a nightmare upon the world? In our pursuit of knowledge, we have pried open a door that was sealed for eons, and some doors are meant to remain forever closed. I can only hope this record serves as a warning to those who might follow in our footsteps. As I pen these final lines, I find my eyes drawn to the window. A winter storm is raging outside, and the wind's howl becomes to my ears that awful, familiar drone. My nerves are frayed. Every creak of the house startles me, and the shadows cast by my lamp seem to writhe in the corner of my vision. Perhaps I will never rid myself of that feeling of watchful dread. Still, I must try to live on, if only to spread the warning. I intend to send copies of this manuscript to trusted colleagues, with certain details obscured, so they do not think me completely mad, and even to authorities, though I doubt any action will be taken until it is too late. Would I even be believed? Perhaps not. Perhaps it is better if this horror dies with me, and yet I know it lives on beneath the ice, in that eternal night, waiting. May God forgive us our folly in those remote, unhallowed depths, and if you who read this ever find yourself in the lonely, polar darkness, beneath skies that churn with uncanny light, and you hear a whisper on the wind that sounds like a voice calling your name, turn back, and pray that the ancient bonds hold. For some horrors are never meant to be disturbed, and in those desolate places of the world, the unknown can and will devour you, body and soul. The Shadows of Grayfield. Ethan Shaw drove north with a sense of purpose tinged by quiet dread. As a journalist for a Boston magazine, he'd been sent to the far reaches of Maine to investigate a string of unexplained disappearances. The late October sun hung low over the horizon as he left the highway for a winding two-lane road flanked by endless forest. Towering pines and bare-branched maples crowded the pavement, their shadows stretching long in the orange glow of dusk. The further he drove, the more isolated he felt. His radio had long since dissolved into static, and even his cell phone had lost signal miles back. It was as if he were driving out of the modern world and into a lonelier, older realm. The assignment had sounded straightforward. Grayfield, a tiny town in northern Maine, population barely 300, had seen an alarming number of people go missing in the past year. The circumstances were bizarre. Hikers, locals, even a passing tourist, all vanished without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle. They were there one moment and gone the next. Some speculated that people got lost in the vast woods or fell victim to accidents, but the patterns were too strange and the count too high for easy explanations. Ethan had pored over the notes on the way up, and a chill had settled in him that wasn't just from the northern air. Now as he neared Grayfield, the chill deepened. A faded wooden sign appeared by the roadside, "Welcome to Grayfield," in peeling white paint. One of its posts was crooked, causing the sign to cant at an odd angle. A lopsided greeting. Ethan eased off the gas and rolled past it. Dusk was swiftly giving way to night, and a mist was gathering between the trees like pale breath. Sporadic houses lined the road, lonely farmhouses with dark windows and paint flaking from age and neglect. The woods pressed in close behind them, eager to reclaim the cleared land. Up ahead, a single street lamp flickered on, casting a weak pool of light over an intersection leading toward the town center. He followed the sign for Main Street. As he drove into Grayfield, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Perhaps it was just the oppressive stillness. No cars, no pedestrians, only the silhouettes of shuttered buildings and the whisper of wind through the pines. He imagined unseen eyes behind darkened windows, tracking the lone outsider rolling into their troubled town. A sense of subtle dread settled over him, inexplicable yet undeniable, as he finally spotted the Grayfield Inn, the only lodging in town. Its porch light beckoned dimly through the gloom. Pulling into the gravel lot, he cut the engine. Silence rushed in, broken only by the ticking of the cooling car and a distant owl's hollow cry. Ethan took a steadying breath and reminded himself why he was here. He had covered strange stories before, unsolved crimes, local legends, but something about Grayfield already felt different. The missing people, the hollow quiet of the streets. It was as if the place itself harbored a secret in its very soil. He grabbed his leather satchel containing his notebook, voice recorder, and camera, then headed inside the inn. The night air was biting cold and carried the scent of damp, decaying leaves. Whatever was happening in Grayfield, he intended to uncover it. The lobby of the Grayfield Inn was dim and still, lit by a single brass lamp. The decor spoke of decades past, faded floral wallpaper, a few threadbare armchairs, a dust-laden chandelier that might have once been charming. A thin, middle-aged woman stood behind the reception desk, and her eyes widened slightly at the sight of a guest. "Evening," Ethan greeted, offering a polite smile as he signed the register. "I have a reservation. Ethan Shaw." "Yes, Mr. Shaw," the woman replied softly. Her name tag read Marjorie. She produced an old-fashioned key on a heavy fob and handed it to him. "Room 3. Just up the stairs." "Thank you," Ethan hesitated, then added gently. "I'm actually here on business. I'm a reporter, writing about the recent events." He watched her face for a reaction. Marjorie's polite expression faltered. Pain flickered in her eyes. "It's been a hard time for us," she said quietly. "So many gone, and no answers." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, and he meant it. "I can't imagine what you're all going through." He accepted the key. The metal was cold and heavy in his palm. "Were you close to any of those who disappeared?" Marjorie looked down, nodding almost imperceptibly. "My cousin Alan," she murmured. "He went hunting last spring and never came back. They never found anything of him." Her voice quivered, and she pressed her lips thin. "It's a small town. We all knew someone." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'm very sorry for your loss," he offered, aware of how hollow it sounded. He wanted to promise he'd find out what happened, but he caught himself. No such promise could be honestly made. Marjorie managed a weak smile. "Just be careful, Mr. Shaw. People around here are on edge." "I will," he assured her. Ethan took the creaky wooden staircase to the second floor. Room 3 was at the top, the first door on the left. Inside, the accommodations were modest but clean. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a wooden dresser and mirror, a radiator clanking faintly as it struggled to warm the chill air. He set his bag down and drew the curtains aside. The window overlooked Main Street, but the view yielded little. One lonesome street lamp and the dark shapes of buildings across the way. Almost everything was closed and dark at this hour, save for a diner sign farther down the block casting a dim neon glow. He sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. Flipping open his notebook, he reviewed the basics of the case. 5 names, 5 lives, now vanished. He scribbled notes about the 5 missing residents. They were disparate in age and background. A hunter, a student, a tourist, a retiree, a shopkeeper, sharing only the fact that each had vanished without a trace. The only common thread was Grayfield itself, and the vast wilderness that surrounded it. Ethan tapped his pen thoughtfully on the paper. 1 disappearance in a small town was unfortunate. 2 was alarming. 5 in less than a year was unheard of. Something was very wrong here. He recalled one particularly unnerving detail from the reports. Mark Foster, the general store owner, had gone missing in the middle of a workday. A customer found the store empty and silent. Mark's truck still out front, the cash register open, and his half-finished lunch still sitting on the counter. It was as if he had been plucked from reality in broad daylight. That case especially baffled the local police, and fueled anxious whispers around town. Outside, the wind picked up, causing an old shutter to bang lightly against the inn's exterior. Ethan realized his hands were trembling slightly. The weight of what he'd come into was settling on him. He took a deep breath and closed the notebook. Fear was already in the air here, seeping into him. He got up to double-check the door was locked and the window latch secured. An irrational precaution, perhaps, but after hearing Marjorie's trembling voice, he felt on edge. Finally, he lay down fully clothed under the quilt. The bed was firm and the pillow thin. For a long while he stared at the dark ceiling, the silence of the room broken only by the occasional groan of the old building settling. He thought of the 5 souls lost somewhere in the darkness, and of what secrets the coming days might reveal. Eventually, exhaustion overtook anxiety, and Ethan drifted into a fitful, dreamless sleep. Morning came cold and pale. Ethan woke to a steely light filtering through the curtains and the distant caw of crows. After shrugging on a flannel shirt and his coat, he ventured downstairs. Marjorie had set out a simple breakfast of coffee and muffins on a sideboard, with a note welcoming him to help himself. There was no sign of her. Perhaps she preferred to avoid more questions. By 9 a.m., Ethan was across the street at the small clapboard building that housed the Grayfield Police. Inside, in a cramped office smelling of coffee and old paper, he met Sheriff Eli Warren. Warren was a stout, balding man in his 50s, with a bristly mustache and weary eyes that nevertheless regarded Ethan with a frank, searching look. "Appreciate you taking the time, Sheriff," Ethan said as they settled in. He clicked on his recorder with a nod of permission. Warren folded his thick arms. "I'll tell you what I can. Not much in the way of good news, though." Ethan opened his notebook. 5 people in under a year. That's highly unusual, especially in a town this small. "Unusual is one word for it," Warren replied with a heavy sigh. "Try nightmare. People are scared to step outside after dark, and I don't blame them. I've been in law enforcement 30 years, and never seen anything like this." "Could we go over the cases briefly?" Ethan asked. "Even if it's on record, I'd like to hear it from your perspective." Sheriff Warren nodded and began recounting each incident, ticking them off on his fingers. Alan Pierce, the hunter, went into the woods as he had dozens of times before. When he didn't return by next morning, a search party went out. They found his campsite deep in the forest, tent zipped up with his gear inside, rifle leaning against a tree. But Alan was gone. No blood, no signs of a bear or struggle. His tracks led a short way from the camp, and then just stopped, Warren said, frowning deeply, as if he'd been plucked off the face of the earth. Dana Mitchell, 17, was walking home at twilight along a country road by the woods. Her parents reported her missing when she never arrived. Volunteers found her backpack in a ditch the next day, but of Dana, herself not a trace. Even bloodhounds couldn't track her. Warren's voice grew quiet. The dogs followed her scent into the trees about 50 yards, then lost it, like she vanished into thin air. Carlos Ruiz, the tourist photographer, left his car at an old trailhead to take pictures of the fall foliage. When he failed to return to his B&B that night, a search was launched. "We combed the woods for days," the sheriff recalled, rubbing his temples. "All we ever found was his camera lens cap near a stream. No footprints, no clothing, nothing else." Edith Jameson, the retired librarian, apparently walked out of her house in the middle of the night. A neighbor saw her in her nightgown wandering toward the trees at the edge of her backyard, as if in a daze. By the time anyone checked on her, she was gone. "Mrs. Jameson, she was a sweet old lady," Warren said softly. "Lived here 60-odd years. She wouldn't have just run off. We searched those woods behind her home high and low. Not a single clue, not even her slippers. Finally, Mark Foster's disappearance 2 weeks ago." Warren's jaw tightened. "Middle of the day, in his own store, with customers coming in and out. One minute he's there behind the counter, the next minute a customer finds the place empty. His truck was parked outside, radio playing in the store. It's like he stepped out for fresh air and never came back, in broad daylight." The sheriff spread his hands in a helpless gesture. "We had state police investigative units here, forensics, tracking dogs, you name it. Nothing turned up. Nothing." Ethan realized he had been holding his breath. He let it out slowly and glanced at his notes. All the facts lined up in neat, terrible order. 5 lives gone, vanished. People have theories, he said carefully. Even whispers or local legends. I've heard some talk about the woods being cursed. Warren grimaced and glanced toward the frosted window. Off the record? Of course, Ethan agreed. The sheriff's steady facade cracked just a bit. This town's got plenty of tall tales. Ghosts, devils in the forest, that sort of thing. I never gave them much mind. But now, well, folks are saying there's something in the woods. Something that takes people. He met Ethan's eyes, embarrassment and fear warring in his own. I don't know what to believe. I just know I've got no evidence to point to a person or bear or anything, and I've got 5 families with no answers. Ethan nodded. Who around here might know more about those tall tales? If I wanted to hear the local lore, is there someone you'd recommend I talk to? Warren rubbed the back of his neck. You could try Silas Brewer. He's a hermit who lives up by the old logging road north of town. Locals used to chuckle at his stories. Not so much anymore. He's eccentric, but he knows the history of these parts. Might tell you about legends and such, if you can get him to talk. The sheriff stood, signaling the meeting's end. Just be respectful. Silas doesn't take kindly to folks treating him like the town loon. I understand. Thank you, Sheriff. Ethan shook Warren's hand. You've been very helpful. On the way out, Ethan paused by a bulletin board in the station's corridor. 5 missing person postings were tacked there in a row. He stared at each photocopied face, the smiling high school portrait of Dana, Edith's gentle, wrinkled countenance, Mark's jovial grin beside a fish he'd caught, Alan with his hunting gear, Carlos with a camera slung around his neck. The black and white images made them look like ghosts. In a way, they were. Fear lived here in Grayfield. And now it was starting to live in Ethan, too. That afternoon, guided by Sheriff Warren's tip, Ethan drove out of town along a rutted logging road to find Silas Brewer's cabin, hopeful the reclusive old-timer could illuminate Grayfield's dark secret. Silas Brewer's home lay at the end of a muddy trail half swallowed by the encroaching woods. The sun was a red smear on the horizon when Ethan arrived, casting long, finger-like shadows through the clearing. He climbed out of his car, the smell of wet earth and pine heavy in the air, and approached the sagging porch of the small cabin. Before he could knock, the door creaked open. Silas stepped into the doorway, a frail figure bundled in a threadbare coat. His face was a map of deep lines framed by a scraggly gray beard, and keen eyes peered out from under unruly brows. He regarded Ethan with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "You're that reporter," he rasped. It wasn't a question. "I am," Ethan said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Mr. Brewer, I'm investigating the disappearances. Sheriff Warren thought you might have insight." Silas grunted and beckoned him in with a curl of his bony hand. "Come on, then." Inside the cabin was dim and hazy with the aroma of wood smoke and something herbal. By the light of a smoking oil lamp, Ethan noted bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters and hand-carved wooden charms lining a shelf, little talismans like stars and spirals. Silas motioned Ethan to sit on a rickety stool by a small table, then settled into a chair opposite with a wince and a creak of old bones. Silas indeed had a chilling tale to tell. In a hushed tone, he explained that Grayfield's woods had long been feared. According to old legends, there was a thin place near Ashwood Creek, where the boundary between worlds wore away. On certain dark, moonless nights, something from the other side could reach through. It lured people with strange blue lights, flickering between the pines and disembodied voices calling their name, drawing them out into the darkness. His own grandfather had witnessed men vanish at a logging camp near the creek back in 1907, and Silas himself claimed he once saw a shimmering curtain of bluish light among the trees, and heard a voice on the wind whisper his name. "Whatever it is ain't human," Silas warned, his eyes haunted in the lamplight. "Call it a doorway to hell or another world. Either way, it don't care about us. It just takes who it wants. You'd be a fool to go looking for it." He fixed Ethan with a stern glare. "If you hear the woods whisper, you turn back. If you see those lights, you run. Some truths ain't worth your life or your sanity, son." Ethan left the cabin shaken. Silas's words clanged in his ears. Run. Don't follow the lights. Yet despite the old man's warning, Ethan felt an inexorable pull. Curiosity and determination drowned out caution. He knew the risk, but he had to see for himself. That very night, under a starless sky, Ethan set out for Ashwood Creek, into the heart of the darkness where the unknown awaited. The woods at night were a world of near total blackness. Ethan parked at a small gravel turnout where an overgrown trail led towards Ashwood Creek. As he left the safety of his car, even the stars above were smothered by a layer of cloud, offering no light. He clicked on his flashlight and stepped onto the narrow path. Immediately, trees closed in around him, their silhouettes crowding the beam. Each footstep sounded unnaturally loud on the carpet of pine needles. The air was cold and utterly still. Not a cricket chirped, not an owl hooted. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Ethan pulled his coat tighter and moved slowly forward, heart thudding in his chest. He was keenly aware of how alone he was out here. Alone except for whatever might be lurking in the dark. After 10 minutes of careful progress, Ethan's flashlight caught a glimpse of water ahead, Ashwood Creek glinting faintly. He switched off the flashlight, wanting to approach quietly. There was a faint glow in the clearing beyond the trees. His pulse quickened. It was a pale blue light hovering in the air above the creek, like a ground-level aurora, exactly as Silas had described. Keeping low, Ethan crept behind the broad trunk of an oak at the edge of the tree line. From that cover he peered out at the clearing. His eyes widened in awe and terror. Over the gently flowing creek hung a shimmering vertical haze of bluish luminescence, about 8 feet tall and 5 feet across. Like a doorway made of light, it wavered and rippled as if blown by an unfelt breeze. The very sight of it made Ethan's skin prickle. This had to be the door between worlds. He fumbled quietly for the camera around his neck and raised it, snapping a quick photo with the shutter silenced. The image in his viewfinder was grainy and dark, but the strange glow was clearly visible. As he adjusted the focus for another shot, a shape moved behind the curtain of light. Ethan froze. Something was on the other side. The shimmering portal swelled, its glow intensifying. With a sound like a soft hiss, a figure stepped through. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. The thing that emerged into the clearing was tall and spindly, its form vaguely humanoid, but disturbingly wrong. In the gloom it appeared as a silhouette with 2 long limbs and a hunched posture. 2 round, faintly luminescent eyes set in its upper body. It was hard to say it had a proper head, cast a sickly glow as they swept over the clearing. Ethan clamped a hand over his own mouth to stifle any sound. His mind raced frantically. This can't be real, but every instinct in his body screamed that it was. The creature's skin, where the blue light touched it, looked slick and gray, stretched over an emaciated frame. It moved with a jerky grace, each step oddly hitching, as if its joints bent both ways. As Ethan crouched trying to make himself small behind the oak, his boot pressed onto a fallen branch. Crack! The dry snap echoed like a gunshot in the silence. The creature's glowing eyes snapped in his direction. It went abruptly still, then emitted a wet, chuffing sniff. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Had it sensed him? He dared not breathe. Slowly, the thing's thin silhouette turned toward the trees where he hid. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with alarming speed, the creature bounded forward on all fours, closing the distance to Ethan's hiding spot in seconds. It moved almost like a grotesque insect, too fast and too fluid. In panic, Ethan burst from cover and ran. Branches lashed at his face as he sprinted back toward the trail. Behind him came the crash of something huge and swift, tearing through the underbrush. A shrill, chittering keen, half shriek, half insect buzz, sliced through the night air. Ethan's chest seized with terror. It's right behind me. He bolted blindly, lungs burning, boots pounding the uneven ground. In his mind he saw those long arms and clawed fingers reaching for him. The car. He just had to reach the car. Ethan tore through the woods, lungs burning and branches whipping at his face. Behind him, the creature crashed closer, emitting an inhuman shriek that spurred him onward. Just when it felt like his legs would give out, he saw the tree line break ahead, the pale gravel of the road and his car beyond it. He erupted from the woods onto the gravel parking area, shoes skidding. The dark bulk of his car was just steps away. Ethan yanked the driver's door open and threw himself inside, slamming the door a split second before a heavy impact rocked the vehicle. The thing had leaped and hit the side of the car. Ethan scrambled to start the engine, hands shaking so badly he jabbed the keys at the ignition twice before finding the slot. The engine roared to life. Almost immediately, a gray, elongated arm smacked against the driver's side window with a dull thud. Ethan cried out. A pale, six-fingered hand with claw-like nails was scrabbling at the glass, mere inches from his face. He didn't wait to see more. Ethan shoved the car into reverse and stomped the accelerator. Tires spit gravel as the car lurched backward. There was a jolt and a screech. The creature had been thrown off, and its nails dragged across the metal with a horrific squeal. Without pausing, Ethan cranked the wheel, shifted to drive, and hit the gas. The car fishtailed, then shot forward down the dirt road, away from Ashwood Creek. As he sped away down the rutted road, Ethan caught one last glimpse of the monstrosity illuminated in his headlights. A gaunt, twisted silhouette standing in the road, its pair of glowing eyes fixed on him. That sight would haunt him forever. He drove with reckless abandon, expecting at any moment to see the creature lunge out of the darkness ahead. Only when the faint lights of Grayfield appeared in the distance did he finally begin to ease off the accelerator. His body shook uncontrollably, mind teetering on the brink of hysteria. He had escaped the woods, but he knew deep down that something had followed him out, burrowed in his very psyche. A passing police officer found Ethan on the side of the road babbling incoherently. He had escaped Grayfield's darkness with his life, but not with his mind. In the days that followed, he lay in feverish delirium, haunted by whatever he had seen. What he had witnessed had shattered his sanity. Grayfield never learned exactly what happened to Ethan. Townsfolk only knew that he returned broken, yet another casualty of the cursed woods. The missing people were never found. Quietly, the locals came to accept that something evil lurked out among the pines. From that day on, they avoided the forest after sundown and ignored any strange lights or whispers in the night. Ethan Shaw was taken away to recover, but he would never be the same. He often woke screaming, convinced he heard voices calling from the darkness. He had peered beyond the veil of reality, and it left his mind permanently scarred. Grayfield's grim secret remains unsolved, hidden in those shadowy woods. And on moonless nights, when a cold wind rustles through the trees, the people of Grayfield remember and shudder. Sometimes they imagine a distant blue glow between the trunks, or a soft whisper on the breeze. They shut their doors tight, praying that whatever cosmic horror dwells beyond our world will remain in the shadows. The Scent of the Forgotten. I first encountered the scent on a damp October night in 1927 in the American city of Coldgrave. Prohibition's hush blanketed the streets, yet behind a shuttered grocery I found a horror that no law could quiet. The alley behind Miller's grocer reeked of rot and stale beer, but beneath those common odors drifted another scent entirely, one I could not name. It crept into my nostrils with a sickly sweet musk, a cloying mix of burnt cedar and decay. As a detective with the Coldgrave Police, I was used to the perfumes of death and vice, yet this scent raised the hairs on my neck. From somewhere beyond the alley came the faint muffled notes of a jazz tune and laughter from a hidden speakeasy, a reminder that normal life carried on in ignorance just a street away. But in that shadowed passage, normalcy had fled. Only death and dread remained to keep me company. My lantern's beam fell upon a man's corpse sprawled amid toppled crates. Even in dim light I saw the savagery wrought upon the body. Deep, jagged lacerations gouged through coat and flesh, as though by some enormous clawed beast. They were unmistakably massive claw marks, as if from a wolf, but far larger than any wolf known. The victim's face was contorted in utter terror, eyes wide at whatever had been his final vision. I heard the scuff of shoes on cobbles behind me. Inspector Harrington stepped into the alley, his ruddy face drawn tight. We exchanged grim nods. It was the third such murder in 2 weeks. Same as the others, I murmured, gesturing at the grotesque wounds. No witnesses, no weapons, only these slashes of impossible ferocity. Already the newspapers whispered of a wolf killer, and panic crept through the city's midnight conversations. As Harrington directed the patrolman to cordon off the scene, I crouched again by the body. My eye caught something peculiar, a faint grayish residue around the torn edges of the victim's coat and flesh. I dabbed it on a finger. It looked like ash or powdery stone. That uncanny scent hung about the blood, as if whatever did this carried the musty odor of old, forgotten places. Suppressing a shudder, I took a scrap of cloth and collected some of the strange dust. Soon the body was sent to the morgue, and I returned to my desk at the precinct to gather any leads. Late into the night, I reviewed the scanned evidence. The victims seemed unrelated: a dock worker, an antique seller, now this nameless drifter. Oddly, those who knew the earlier victims struggled to recall much about them, as if the men had already faded from memory. Thumbing through reports, I also noted each murder site lay in the oldest quarters of Coldgrave, places steeped in history and decay. Coldgrave was a city of deep roots. Its colonial-era cobblestone alleys and moldering mansions often pressed cheek by jowl with new brick tenements. In these derelict corners, one could sense the weight of years and whispers of things best forgotten. It was in such a dim quarter that this horror prowled. Perhaps that was coincidence, but a nagging thought told me otherwise. One item from the latest scene stood out. On the alley wall behind Miller's grocer, partly obscured by ivy and grime, I spotted a crude symbol drawn in chalk or soot. In my notebook, I sketched its peculiar form, a spiral enclosing an angular eye shape. I didn't recognize it from any gang or group. It felt older, something arcane. Unease gnawed at me, so I resolved to consult an expert on symbols and lore at the university the next day. That night, sleep came in uneasy fits. I dreamt of a great black shape stalking through deserted streets under a gibbous moon. In the dream, I followed an alluring scent through alleyways I half knew, down stairways into darkness. I heard distant chanting echo off stone walls and saw an altar wreathed in shadows. A pair of glowing amber eyes opened in the void beyond, and a deep growl rose that shook the ground. I awoke with a start, just as unseen claws were about to seize me. My heart pounded, and the whisper of those chanted words still echoed in my ears. The phantom odor of that sweet decay clung to my senses as I bolted upright in the darkness. Morning brought a weak sun behind slate-gray clouds. I headed to Coldgrave University's Antiquities Department, where my old acquaintance, Dr. Harold Atwater, lectured on history and folklore. He greeted me in his dusty office cluttered with books. Over strong tea, I showed him the symbol from my notebook. Atwater's eyes widened behind his spectacles. "Good heavens! Where did you see this?" he asked. I admitted it was connected to a case, and he pursed his lips gravely. "This symbol," Atwater said, tracing its shape, "is associated with a very obscure cult. They were called the Brotherhood of the Unremembered, if I recall correctly, a sect that supposedly worshipped a god of oblivion, of forgotten things." He pulled a heavy tome from a shelf, flipping pages to a drawing much like my sketch. "Here," he pointed to a passage. The faded text described a congregation that sought to offer up their own names and memories to an ancient being, so that this nameless god might enter our world. Its price for crossing the threshold was the erasure of its worshippers from history, literally wiping them from the memory of all who knew them. A chill ran through me. The victims, barely remembered by friends, the ashen residue, the uncanny scent. It fit too well. I pressed Atwater for more. He hesitated, then said quietly, "There were rumors such a cult existed here in Coldgrave decades ago. They met in secret beneath an old chapel on Dunwich Street until, according to legend, they all vanished one night in 1887. Some say they succeeded in their ritual and were consumed by it." My mouth felt dry, but I had to ask, "If they're back, how do I stop them?" Atwater shook his head, a look of pity in his eyes. "Be very careful, Devitt. This is not a foe you can fight with fists or bullets. And if the tales are true, the more you strive against it, the more you risk becoming one of the forgotten yourself." I left his office with his warning echoing in my mind. Part of me wanted to summon every officer in Coldgrave to raid that old chapel, but what evidence could I give? They would never believe talk of a god that feeds on memory, and even if they did, who knows if the influence of this evil would make them forget why they came. In the end, I resolved to investigate the chapel myself, alone, while I still knew what I was looking for. Dusk was falling as I made my way to the ruins of the old Dunwich Street Chapel. Rain began to drizzle, peppering the broken flagstones as I approached the padlocked iron gate around the crumbling stone structure. Scaling the gate, I dropped into the weed-choked yard. The chapel's charred door hung ajar. Inside, the air was stagnant with age, and a deathly hush clung to the ruins. I stepped carefully among the shattered pews and fragments of stained glass littering the floor. Faded symbols identical to the one I'd drawn marked the soot-stained walls. My pulse quickened. I was in the right place. A noise echoed from below, muffled voices chanting in an eldritch rhythm, the same cadence from my nightmare. I crept down a stone stair hidden behind the collapsed altar. Each step carried me deeper beneath the chapel, into a subterranean hall lit by flickering torches. Peering around a corner, I beheld a scene out of humanity's darkest imaginings. For a heartbeat, primal fear rooted me in place. My mind reeled on the edge of madness at the sight of such a blasphemous rite made real. But when I spied Harrington's limp form on that altar, a surge of resolve overcame terror. A surge of horror and anger propelled me into action. Hooded figures ringed a circular chamber, their faces obscured by shadow and zeal. Their low chant had a droning cadence that made my blood run cold, echoing off the damp stone. At the center, on a crude altar stone, lay Inspector Harrington, bound and ominously still, eyes staring sightlessly upward. I burst into the chamber, revolver drawn. "Police!" I barked, my voice ricocheting off the walls. The cultists recoiled in surprise. For a moment, all was chaos. One robed acolyte lunged at me with a ritual dagger. I fired the gun's flash, illuminating madness on his face as he fell. Others rushed at me in a frenzy. I fought desperately, exchanging blows amid the smoke and shouting. A chorus of hysterical laughter and wrath echoed as the cult swarmed. In the tumult, I glimpsed the gray-haired priestess at the altar raise her blood-stained knife and plunge it into Harrington's chest. His blood spilled along carved channels into the altar, flowing into grooves etched on the floor, a sinister pattern completing itself. A thunderous howl resonated through the chamber, unlike any human or beastly sound. The blood on the floor began to glow with a pale phosphorescence, outlining a sigil twin to the one on the walls. In that luminescent blood, a shape took form, a hulking outline that defied sanity. It was like a wolf grown impossibly vast and misshapen, limbs too long and joints at unnatural angles. Eyes like smoldering coals flared in what might have been its head. The thing was not fully flesh. It flickered as if half in this world and half in some other, a nightmare straining through a rip in reality. The remaining cultists raised their voices in wild exultation. Some cried out in ecstasy even as tears of terror streamed down their cheeks. One man stumbled too close to the glowing sigil. The beast form lashed out with a shadowy claw. The acolyte's scream died as he crumpled. His body left a withered husk as if drained of life in an instant. I realized with horror that this abomination was feeding, devouring its devotees' very beings, to force its way into our realm. Summoning every ounce of resolve, I took aim at the priestess and fired. She collapsed with a piercing wail. Then I dashed forward and heaved against the altar stone with all my strength. It toppled, disrupting the blood pattern. The sigil on the floor shattered, its eerie light guttering out. An inhuman roar shook the chamber, a sound of fury and frustration. The half-formed beast bellowed and swiped its massive claws blindly. I was struck by something, perhaps a flailing cultist, or a tendril of the creature, and knocked off my feet. My head hit the cold stone, and the world went black. I awoke in the muddy yard outside the chapel ruins, under a sky of paling stars. Rain had ceased. Only the drip from eaves broke the silence. My body ached from bruises and a gash on my temple, but I was alive. Of the cultists, or their summoned horror, there was no sign, save for a lingering wisp of that unnatural scent in the cold air. It seemed the ritual had been disrupted, and whatever thing they beckoned was hurled back into the void for now. Stumbling home, I found my thoughts hazy. Pieces of that night already felt distant, like the vestiges of a nightmare. I cleaned my wounds and steeled myself to report to the precinct at first light. But fate had a crueler design. When I arrived at police headquarters, I was met with blank stares. Officers I'd worked with for years, looked at me as a stranger. My desk had been cleared out, reassigned as if I'd never been there at all. Heart pounding, I sought out Detective Monroe, an old partner. He frowned in puzzlement when I hailed him. "Do we know each other?" he asked politely. It was as Atwater warned. The more I fought this cult and its god, the more I was being erased from others' minds. A terror unlike any before seized me. I was becoming one of the forgotten. In the mirror of a deserted washroom at the station, I caught my reflection and gasped. My visage had altered subtly, but surely. My eyes were sunken, rimmed with shadow. At my temples, hair had turned ashen gray. More alarming, a patch of coarse, dark fuzz bristled on my forearm where a wound from the creature had grazed me. I tore open my sleeve. The skin around that old scratch was thickening and rough. A wave of nausea hit me. Not only was I fading from memory, but some monstrous change was creeping under my skin. I fled the station before more confusion could ensue. As I stumbled through back streets, a sudden wave of ravenous hunger struck me. Passing a butcher's stall opening for the morning trade, the raw scent of red meat hit me with dizzying force. I realized with revulsion that part of me wanted nothing more than to tear into bloody cuts, then and there. Shuddering at my own impulse, I forced myself onward, terrified of what I was becoming. I headed straight to Dr. Atwater's home. He answered the door warily, but relief crossed his face as he recognized me. Thank God, he still remembered. Inside by the fire, I recounted what happened under the chapel. Atwater listened in horror, then set about frantically searching his books for some counterspell or remedy. Even as he worked, he tied a ribbon around my wrist with a slip of paper bearing my name. An old charm to preserve identity, he said. I spent the rest of that day in his study, fighting sleep, fearful that if I drifted off, I might lose more of myself. Over the next night and day, we attempted various wards of protection. We burned sage and carved my name into a wax talisman as a focus, reciting incantations in Latin to anchor my soul. Whether these efforts truly helped, I cannot be sure, but gradually the unnatural changes in my body slowed, then halted. The patch of beast-like hair loosened and fell away. The itching beneath my skin subsided. I remained, at least for now, fully human. Yet the world's memory of me was not so easily restored. Beyond Atwater and a scant few others, I was a ghost. Official records of my existence, inexplicably gone. Acquaintances' recollections blank where my presence used to be. In the end, I had no choice but to disappear from Coldgrave. A man forgotten by society cannot remain a public detective. My final weeks there were spent as a specter on the fringes, watching a world that continued on without me. The murders were unceremoniously written off as wild animal attacks. No mention of cults or cosmic horrors reached the papers. To most, Harrington never existed at all. Now I write these pages from a small cabin in distant hills, where no curious eyes pry. I keep a journal of my life and pin mementos to the wall, to reassure myself that I was real, and that I mattered. Already I catch myself forgetting simple things, old addresses, childhood songs, even the faces of loved ones long gone, as if my own past is being devoured by the void. Dr. Atwater writes to me occasionally, though he must reread my letters to recall who I am. I fear one day even he will forget, despite all precautions. The god of forgotten things is patient and persistent. Sometimes on a calm night, I catch the faint whiff of that sickly sweet musk on the breeze. When I do, a chill ripples through me. I bar my door and load my revolver, though I know it's futile against what may come. I wonder if the entity lingers still in the liminal shadows, waiting until I am completely unmoored from human remembrance, ripe to be plucked. My curse is to remember what others cannot, and to dread that which might already be half forgotten by the world. In these moments, I feel a savage hunger stir deep in my soul, a leftover whisper from that night beneath the chapel. Perhaps it is the creature's mark upon me, tying us together inextricably. I do not know whether I will ultimately become a monster or simply fade into nothing. Either fate might be a kind of release, but I resist both for now. If these are my final words, let them stand as a testament to what transpired in Coldgrave. There are horrors that gnaw at the threads binding us to existence, ancient things lurking in the empty spaces of memory. I have gazed into that abyss, and felt it gaze back, breathing its odor into my very blood. I pray that oblivion forgets me last of all, yet every night as the darkness deepens, I cannot escape the creeping dread or the haunting scent of the forgotten, lingering just outside my door. The Puppet of the Deep Ones. Editor's note: the following entries were found in a leather-bound journal amid the possessions of Jonathan Harrington, an antiquarian of Arkham who disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1926. The manuscript is presented verbatim. October 3rd, 1926. I discovered a small wooden puppet of curious craftsmanship among the effects of my late Uncle Elias's seaside cottage. It stands roughly a foot tall, carved from dark polished wood, and portrays no creature I recognize. A grotesque figure, vaguely amphibian, yet disturbingly human in aspect. The puppet's eyes are tiny black pearls that glisten with a malignant awareness. I confess to an uneasy fascination as I cradle this bizarre figurine in my hands. Despite its repulsive form, I am reluctant to set it aside. Uncle Elias was a sailor who traveled to many exotic ports. Perhaps this artifact is a souvenir from some remote island. A faint scent of brine clings to it, as if it had long lain submerged in the sea. The paint on its surface is faded and peeling, revealing a scaly texture beneath. The creature has a gaping fanged maw and webbed hands. Its proportions are subtly wrong, lending the thing a nightmarish aspect. I shall keep the puppet for now, out of both scholarly curiosity and an inexplicable attachment. As I write by lamplight, it sits upon my desk. Its black pearl eyes catch the dim light with an illusion of sentience, an effect most unnerving. I will retire for the night, though I suspect strange dreams may trouble my sleep after handling this uncanny object. October 7th, 1926. My nights have been restless since bringing the puppet home. Last night I dreamed of a vast black ocean under a moonless sky. I stood on the deck of a derelict ship, lost at sea, while a distant chant echoed over the waters. Peering over the rail, I glimpsed misshapen figures writhing just beneath the waves in infernal procession. I awoke in terror, drenched in sweat and convinced that something unseen had been watching me in the dark. This morning I found the puppet not as I left it. I had set it facing the window, yet now its head seemed subtly turned toward the door, toward me. It must be a trick of memory, or a hallucination of my uneasy mind. I tested its joints. The neck moved more freely than expected, but surely it could not have shifted on its own. The notion is absurd. Even so, I cannot shake the feeling that its glassy eyes observed me as I slept. By daylight I discovered faint symbols etched on the puppet's back, nearly worn away and unlike any alphabet or nautical marking I know. I made a rubbing of these markings, and planned to consult the Miskatonic University Library for any similar sigils in obscure lore. Perhaps Uncle Elias truly did bring this artifact from some far-flung land where dark traditions linger. In all my study of curiosities, never have I felt such an oppressive horror as this puppet exudes. I catch myself handling it obsessively, tracing its monstrous contours as if in a trance, only to awake with a start to what I am doing. Tonight, I will lock it in a cabinet to put my mind at ease. October 10th, 1926. These past 2 nights have brought nightmares of dreadful intensity. In one dream, I wandered through an ancient city submerged beneath a black ocean, breathing water as if it were air, while a living version of the puppet swam beside me through Eldritch ruins. In another vision, I stood in a torch-lit subterranean hall among hooded worshippers. The puppet lay upon an altar and then moved of its own accord, rising on ungainly limbs to dance jerkily as a low chant echoed. To my horror, I found myself chanting along in an unknown tongue. When I looked down at my hands in the dream, they were webbed, and my skin had turned a pallid green. I awoke each time in utter terror, the taste of salt and decay clinging to my tongue. Even in waking hours, I sense unnatural changes. A persistent scent of brine lingers in the house that no amount of fresh air dispels. My skin feels clammy, and in the mirror my morning eyes appear just a fraction larger, gleaming with a peculiar light. Surely this is all my imagination, stoked by lack of sleep and morbid preoccupation. I retrieve the puppet from its cabinet, half hoping it might somehow explain these phenomena. It only regards me with a frozen grimace that now strikes me as a mocking leer. I am determined to understand what afflicts me. Today I will visit the Miskatonic University Library to seek answers in old volumes. There must be some account of this creature, or the symbol it bears. If Uncle Elias fell victim to some oceanic curse on his voyages, I must know before it is too late. My search at the Miskatonic University Library has yielded both enlightenment and alarm. I unearthed the maritime legend in an old whaler's journal of a grotesque idol worshipped by Pacific Islanders in honor of a primordial sea demon. Sailors who gazed upon this idol were said to be marked by the Deep One and inexorably drawn into the ocean's depths. The crude illustration in the journal bore an unsettling resemblance to the puppet from Uncle Elias's attic. The notes suggested these idols were not mere effigies, but vessels for the sea demon's influence, conduits through which briny darkness seeps into the minds of men. One passage warned that whoever heeds the effigy's call shall become one with the nameless deep, their form and soul transformed to serve its eldritch master. I was inclined to dismiss this as superstitious drivel from a mad sailor, yet the strange symbols shown in the journal matched the markings on the puppet almost exactly. I returned home at dusk, my mind racing. Uncle Elias died raving that the sea was calling him in his final weeks, a cry we dismissed as delirium. Now I fear he suffered the very curse described in that journal. I have placed the puppet on my desk again as night falls. Part of me hopes for a sign to confirm these horrors, even as I shudder at the thought. It seems my fate is entwined with this abhorrent object. October 18th, 1926. The changes in me are no longer imaginary. My skin has taken on a faint greenish cast and an unpleasantly rubbery texture. Thin webbing now stretches between my fingers. I wear gloves even alone, for the sight of my own hands fills me with dread. I hear the puppet's call even in daylight, a faint whisper like distant waves forming unholy words just beyond the edge of hearing. My willpower wanes as its influence waxes, and it is a struggle to pen these lines rather than succumb to gazing for hours into those abyssal pearl eyes. Today, in a moment of terrified lucidity, I attempted to destroy the puppet. I thrust the wooden abomination into the hearth's flames. The fire charred its contorted form, and for an instant hope flared within me that this nightmare might end. But the flames did not consume it. A high-pitched hiss rose, whether from the fire or the puppet itself I know not, and a stench of charnel brine filled the parlor, driving me back. The fire died as if quenched by an unseen wave. When I dared look, the puppet lay blackened, but intact among the ashes, its pearl eyes glinting malevolently beneath a coating of soot. An unspeakable despair seized me at this sight. In panic and fury, I hurled the thing out into the storm and bolted my door. Exhaustion claimed me soon after. By morning, the puppet was nowhere to be seen outside. I dared to hope nature or some thief had spirited it away. That hope shattered when I found it sitting upon my desk, as though it had never left. Its scorched mouth now seems twisted into a ghastly grin. I cannot fathom how it returned, whether it crawled on its own limbs or was carried by unseen forces. We are bound together, it and I. My disfigurement worsens by the hour. The outlines of gills have formed as slits on my neck. Breathing is labored unless I sit in dampness. I keep a basin of water nearby and find relief when inhaling its moist air. My reflection is barely recognizable. Bulging, black pupilled eyes stare back with alien dispassion. How much of me truly remains? I fear the answer as much as I fear what is yet to come. October 30th, 1926. I write what may be my last coherent entry. The man I was a fortnight ago is nearly gone, replaced by something else. I have sealed myself in darkness, for light now pains my eyes which have grown accustomed to gloom. My memories of human life fade, the taste of bread, the warmth of a fire, the sound of my own name, all dimming, supplanted by alien hungers and uncanny recollections not my own. Yet a fragment of Jonathan Harrington remains, observing in despair as he is subsumed. That fragment composes these words while my fingers, now curled and tipped with claw-like nails, struggle to grip the pen. The act of writing feels alien, as though language itself were slipping away from the creature coiled within my brain. I know not if I write to warn others, or simply to chronicle my collapse. Perhaps I cling to a mad hope that someone will find these pages and destroy the puppet, if it can be destroyed at all. The transformation is nearly complete. My skin is thickened into a scaly hide, and my spine contorts so that standing upright is laborious. I lurch with a gait more akin to a shambling beast. I have barred my doors, not to keep the world out, but to keep myself in, for the impulses surging through my blood are not wholly my own, and I dread what I might do to an unwary visitor. In mirrors and shadowed corners I glimpse a monstrosity that used to be me. My silhouette, hunched and unnatural, is indistinguishable from the puppet's misshapen figure. Indeed, sometimes I see the puppet not as a carved toy, but as a living thing that writhes and mocks me, reflecting what I have become. I no longer know where it ends, and I begin. October 31st, 1926. The hour grows late, and my humanity is all but washed away in this tide of madness and mutation. On this night of all nights, the pull from beyond the veil is irresistible. The stars outside aligned into patterns that make my heart, or what remains of it, throb with dark recognition. I feel the call of the black ocean beyond the harbor, an invitation to return to the ancient waters and the city of dreadful sleep. The puppet sits before me on the desk, motionless, but humming in my mind with unsung promises. It tells me what must be done. I will take the puppet and venture to the coast under cover of darkness. There is a rocky cove beyond Kingsport where the waves crash against the stone in tones of otherworldly music. In that seething gloom, the boundary between land and sea, between reality and the other realm, grows thin. They are waiting there, the ones from my dreams. They have always been waiting. I do not know if I go to my doom or to my rebirth. Perhaps those terms are one and the same. To whoever finds this journal, forgive me, for I lack the strength to resist the call. The thing I am becoming yearns for the deep, and the voice that guides it is older than the stars. I leave these pages as the last testament of a man who was, before the puppet claimed me. The final lines trail off in illegible scrawls and watery stains, as if the writer was interrupted or overcome at the moment of writing. The fate of Jonathan Harrington remains unknown, his abandoned journal the only witness to his horrifying transformation. The Nameless Gateway. I write these words in a state of profound dread and uncertainty, fully aware that by the time they are read, if they ever are, my sanity may already have eroded into irrevocable ruin. It is winter of 1927, and I find myself compelled to recount the ghastly events which have led me to this precipitous brink of despair. My account is no mere fancy, nor the feverish rantings of a madman, though I fear madness is the only fitting refuge after what I have witnessed, but rather a faithful testimony of horrors that crawled insidiously into the quiet life of a solitary scholar in Arkham, Massachusetts. Until recently, I led a life of studious calm in my modest house on a tranquil, elm-lined street. Books and solitary walks were my chief companions, yet my peaceful routine was soon disrupted by the arrival of a new neighbor in the long vacant house next door, a fellow of scholarly inclination named Mr. Harold Atwood. At first, I greeted the development with mild interest and cautious optimism. It is a rare boon for a reclusive bachelor such as myself to find a like-minded soul living adjacent. Mr. Atwood appeared to be in his early 40s, not much my senior, with a polite if distant demeanor. He conveyed the impression of a refined gentleman with an academic bearing. His belongings, delivered in several crates and trunks, included numerous books and scientific instruments, which he handled with the delicate reverence of a man for whom knowledge was paramount. Our initial exchanges were brief and formal. Over the ensuing weeks, we developed a quiet camaraderie founded on mutual respect for each other's privacy. On a crisp October evening, we shared a pot of tea by my hearth, engaging in meandering conversation about history, astronomy, and the more arcane sciences. I found his knowledge impressive, though his manner was often distracted, as if some portion of his mind forever dwelt on more distant matters. He listened with polite curiosity as I recounted my own humble research into local folklore and colonial history, and in turn he hinted at a keen interest in esoteric subjects, mentioning medieval alchemy and even the occult, which he dismissed with a self-deprecating chuckle as mere idle curiosity. There was nothing in those early days to foreshadow the unspeakable shadow that would later fall between our houses. Indeed, the pale autumn sun shone innocuously on our little street, and the maples and elms blazed with russet and gold. If occasionally I noticed a peculiar glint in Atwood's gray eyes, or detected a quaver in his voice when he spoke of ancient philosophies, I attributed it to harmless eccentricity. How could I have known the significance of those subtle harbingers? How could anyone in a world still recovering from the Great War and flush with modern promise guess that an unfathomable horror was awakening next door? In truth, I might have remained blissfully ignorant of the looming catastrophe, had it not been for a chance discovery that set everything into motion. One late October night, well after midnight, I was roused from sleep by the faint sound of scraping and thudding, seemingly coming from the direction of Atwood's property. My bedchamber, situated at the side of my house, has a window that looks directly onto the neighboring yard. Pulling aside the heavy damask curtain, I peered into the darkness. Through the skeletal branches of nearly bare oaks, I perceived a weak light emanating from the basement windows of the Atwood house. The panes glowed with a fitful yellow illumination, as from a lantern set upon the cellar floor. The noises, scrape, thud, and a muffled grating, continued sporadically. It sounded as if my neighbor were dragging something heavy across the earth or stone. At that moment I felt a vague unease, a stir of instinctual caution. The rational part of my mind told me there was nothing amiss. Perhaps Mr. Atwood, like many new homeowners, was merely engaged in some late-night rearrangement of belongings, or repairing of the old basement masonry. The houses on our streets were relics of a former age, built with stone cellars that often needed reinforcement, and yet an irrational whisper in my thoughts hinted at something uncanny in the furtive nature of these midnight labors. Why at such an hour, without even the comfort of daylight or the help of workmen, did he toil alone beneath the earth? Sleep did not easily reclaim me that night. I lay awake until the small hours, listening intently. At length the noises ceased, and the light vanished, leaving only the indifferent glow of a gibbous moon filtering through the clouds. I eventually drifted into a restless slumber, plagued with indistinct dreams of subterranean passageways and distant, maddening whispers, echoing from caverns deep in the earth. When I awoke, eyes gritty and thoughts unsettled, I resolved that I would inquire politely of Mr. Atwood about his nocturnal activities. After all, neighborly concern was only proper, and perhaps I could offer assistance if he was struggling with some burden. Little did I suspect how pivotal that innocent inquiry would prove, or what door it would begin to open, both in the literal depths of his cellar and into realms of horrific revelation from which neither of us would emerge unscathed. True to my intention, I paid a visit to Mr. Atwood the very next afternoon. Pale autumn sunlight filtered through thinning clouds as I crossed the narrow strip of lawn separating our homes. I remember carrying a small tin of freshly baked biscuits, an innocuous pretense for calling on a neighbor unannounced. When he answered the door, I was at once struck by his appearance. Though only a day or two had passed since I last saw him, a stark change had come over his countenance. His eyes were rimmed with shadow, red-veined and bloodshot, as if he had slept precious little. His face bore a peculiar expression, a mingling of excitement and disquiet. yet he greeted me civilly enough and invited me inside, albeit with a distracted air. In his parlor, I noticed books strewn about in disarray, some lying open as if hastily consulted. Charts of stars and old architectural plans of his property lay across a velvet settee. He offered me a seat, sweeping aside a crumpled sheaf of papers covered in hastily scrawled notes and symbols I did not immediately recognize. As I proffered the tin of biscuits, making polite apologies for the intrusion, he managed a strained smile. His hands trembled slightly as he poured us each a cup of strong tea from a silver pot. After an exchange of trivial pleasantries, during which his gaze darted repeatedly toward the hallway leading to the basement door, I gently inquired whether he had been working on some project late the previous night. At this he started visibly, nearly dropping his teacup. For a moment a guarded look came over him, as if I had inadvertently trespassed upon a secret. But then, setting the cup down with deliberate care, he sighed and ran a hand through his disheveled dark hair. "You heard me, did you?" he asked softly. There was a note of fatigue and resignation in his voice, but beneath it a tremor of exhilaration. "I suppose I ought to apologize for any disturbance. I've been occupied with an unexpected finding in the cellar. It was not my intention to work so late, but I confess I lost track of time." I assured him no apology was necessary, adding that my concern was for his well-being, that I had imagined he might have injured himself moving something heavy at such hour. At this genuine concern, Atwood's guardedness seemed to ease. His austere features softened momentarily into an expression almost childlike in its eagerness. "You are very kind. In truth, I could use an understanding ear. I have stumbled upon something rather extraordinary," he confessed, voice hushed, yet fervent. "It began with a simple home improvement, removing some rotted planks in the cellar floor for replacement. Underneath, I discovered a sealed, stone trap door or hatch of some kind. The thing was ancient, sealed with rusted iron fittings. I managed to pry it open. What I found beneath, well, perhaps you would like to see for yourself." His invitation, whispered with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, both thrilled and alarmed me. Part of me recoiled at the thought of descending into that cold cellar where I had seen the midnight light. Another part, driven by scholarly curiosity and a desire to assist my neighbor, could not refuse. Steeling myself, I nodded. Atwood fetched a lantern from a hook by the kitchen entry, and together we proceeded down the creaking wooden steps into the cellar. A damp earthen smell greeted us. The cellar of the house was typical of 18th century New England homes. Stone walls thick with effervescent salt, a low ceiling bristling with cobwebs, and a floor of hard-packed dirt, except where planks had been torn up in one corner. There, indeed, lay a gaping rectangular hole about 3 feet by 3, edged by crumbling old bricks and stone. The heavy stone slab that had covered it was propped against the wall nearby. A cool draft wafted up from the dark aperture, carrying with it an odor I can only describe as ancient, a musty, grave-like exhalation from depths long sealed away. Atwood held the lantern aloft, and its flickering flame cast quivering shadows as we approached the opening. I peered down and saw a narrow staircase of stone steps leading further below, seemingly carved into the very bedrock. Time and moisture had rounded their edges. Incredibly, these steps implied the existence of a subcellar or buried chamber predating the house itself. My heart quickened at the implications. Here was tangible history, perhaps a forgotten hideaway from colonial days, or something even older. Wordlessly, Atwood began descending, and I, after a brief hesitation, followed close. The steps spiraled sharply and we had to crouch to avoid the dripping ceiling. The lantern's light revealed damp stone walls, etched with what looked like primitive carvings or symbols. I recognized none of them. They were not the hex signs or religious iconography one might expect if colonists or later residents had carved them. Instead, they were abstract, composed of whorls and geometric patterns that disoriented the eye if stared at too intently. I felt a slight nausea looking at those strange glyphs, an inexplicable vertigo as if the shape subtly defied normal geometry. At a depth perhaps 20 feet below the regular cellar, the staircase terminated before a stout door of oak, blackened with age. Remarkably, when Atwood pressed upon it, it yielded inward with a drawn-out creak, revealing a small chamber beyond. We stepped inside. The air was stifling and cold. The lantern light unveiled an impossible sight. The room's dimensions seemed larger than what we could logically fit beneath the house and yard above. Indeed, by my reckoning, it extended well beyond the property line, an irrational underground extension. The architecture of the space was anomalous as well, corners that did not meet at right angles, and a ceiling that arched in a gentle dome, far taller than the shallow depth we descended should have allowed. It was as though the builders had employed some non-Euclidean geometry, warping the room's dimensions beyond the normal laws of space. I recall gasping, convinced my perception was being fooled by an optical illusion, or the disorienting carvings which continued across the walls, meeting and diverging in bizarre patterns. "Do you see?" Atwood's voice echoed in the uncanny chamber, startling me. He walked toward the center of the room, where lay scattered debris, fragments of wood and metal, perhaps remnants of furniture or coffers long decayed, and what looked to be bones. I knelt gingerly to pick up a piece, indeed a human femur by the shape of it, crumbling to powder in my hand with extreme age. Who had been sealed in this crypt, and why? My companion seemed scarcely to heed the morbid discovery of bones. His lantern was fixed upon the far end of the chamber, where stood a curious structure, a tall archway of carved stone, freestanding against the wall. The carvings upon the archway writhed in the lantern's flicker, forming a border of intertwining serpentine figures and unidentifiable symbols similar to those on the walls. The center of the arch was filled not with stone or earth, but with a circular expanse of utter blackness, a darkness so deep it devoured the light. Yet as I stared, I thought I could discern faint pinpoints of light shimmering within that darkness, like distant stars winking in and out. An involuntary shudder passed through me. The archway's void seemed to drink in not only the light, but also the warmth and sound around us, as if it led to a vast and empty gulf. Atwood stood beside the arch, looking from it to me with fever-bright eyes. His face, half lit by the lantern and half in shadow, bore a strange exaltation. "This is what I found," he whispered reverently. "A portal, a doorway, perhaps to the very realm of legend. Do you feel it? The veil here is thin. There is power in this place." I was at a loss for words. My mind struggled to process what I saw. Surely it could not be a literal portal. Perhaps some trick of the light, or a pool of pitch, or water that gave an illusion of depth. I stepped closer, reaching a hand toward the light-devouring void. An immediate wave of nausea and dizziness washed over me, and my arm hairs stood on end. The space within the arch was unnaturally cold, far colder than the already chilly chamber. I jerked my hand back instinctively. Every rational impulse in me screamed that we should flee, reseal this crypt, and never return. And yet, countering all sense, there was a subtle pull emanating from the archway, an almost magnetic lure on the mind, tugging at curiosity, promising revelations beyond mortal comprehension. Seeing my reaction, Atwood gave a thin smile. "I have not entered it. Not yet," he said. "I've spent last night examining the texts, trying to understand these symbols. They correspond to no language I know, and I know many. I suspect this archway is extremely old, pre-colonial, perhaps pre-human. Imagine, my friend, what this could mean. A gateway built by unknown hands. It could be an incredible archaeological discovery." His words spilled out rapidly, a tremor betraying his excitement and fear. Archaeological discovery? The thing felt decidedly unholy, more akin to an occult gateway than any artifact one would find catalogued in an academic journal. I wanted to protest, to urge him to seal it back up at once, but my tongue felt leaden. Instantly, I mutely allowed him to continue his fervent theorizing about ancient civilizations, about legends of doorways to other worlds. He referenced obscure myths, babbling about Celtic fairy mounds, Egyptian underworld passages, even pre-human lore hinting at places where the stars touch the earth. The more he spoke, the more unnerved I became. There was a manic gleam in his eye I did not like at all. At length I insisted we depart the suffocating chamber. The oppressive feeling had grown unbearable, as if unseen eyes crowded around us from dark corners. Reluctantly, Atwood acquiesced, though he kept his gaze fixed on the black portal until the door creaked shut once more, cutting off that intangible pull. We ascended the spiral steps in uneasy silence. When we finally emerged into the relative normalcy of the house above, I heaved a sigh of relief. I noticed Atwood blinking at the daylight filtering in from the kitchen window, as if awakening from a dream. "We must be cautious," I ventured carefully. "Such a find. It defies explanation. Perhaps it would be wise to notify authorities, archaeologists from the university, or even to seal it until more can be learned." My suggestion met with a sharp reaction. Atwood's face hardened, and for a moment I glimpsed a fierce proprietary anger in his expression, but just as quickly he composed himself. "I understand your concern," he replied, voice tight, "but if I inform the authorities, they would swoop in and take this discovery out of my hands. I cannot allow that, not until I've studied it further. There is no need for alarm." Placing a trembling hand on my shoulder, he attempted a reassuring smile that did little to hide the anxiety behind his eyes. "I give you my word I shall be careful. Let us keep this matter between ourselves for now. After all, it could be nothing, a curiosity of geology or an old smuggler's tunnel. If it proves dangerous or beyond my understanding, I will seal it. You have my word." Unconvinced, but unwilling to offend my neighbor or intrude further, I nodded and took my leave soon after, refusing his offer of a second cup of tea. As I stepped out into the dull afternoon light, I felt an inexplicable weight lift from my shoulders, only to be replaced by a new burden of worry. Something was terribly amiss in that subcellar chamber. Something that defied natural law lingered behind that arch. I could not banish from my mind the image of that star-studded darkness, or the hunger I imagined behind it. Walking back to my own door, I realized my hands were shaking. I told myself it was the adrenaline of excitement and fear, the thrill of discovery, but deep down, a voice of instinct warned me that we had uncovered something that should have stayed buried. In my soul, a quiet dread blossomed, though I tried to dismiss it as simple shock. I resolved to keep a close eye on Mr. Atwood in the coming days. No scholarly curiosity, however great, was worth the risk of meddling with forces one did not understand. Had I known how swiftly events would escalate, I might have acted more decisively then and there. But fate, it seems, had woven a darker path than I could yet see, and we were already ensnared in its web. In the days that followed our descent into that hidden chamber, Mr. Atwood's demeanor and habits shifted into increasingly disconcerting ways. Where before he maintained a courteous, if reserved, social presence, he now all but vanished from sight. The curtains of his house remained drawn both day and night. I seldom caught more than a glimpse of him. Perhaps a gaunt silhouette passing a window at odd hours, or a brief encounter at dusk as he hurried across the yard, eyes downcast, muttering to himself. On such occasions, I would call a greeting only to have him flinch and offer a curt nod before scurrying away like a man pursued by unseen phantoms. Physically, he appeared to wither under the weight of some unseen burden. His complexion, once merely pale, became wan and sallow, almost waxen in the rare moments I saw his face. A noticeable tremor afflicted his limbs. One afternoon, I observed him from my study window as he stumbled while stepping off his porch. He caught himself with a hand on the railing, and for a moment, I thought I saw him convulsing, as if suppressing a wave of nausea or pain. He straightened and looked about nervously before retreating indoors. It did not escape my notice that he wore the same rumpled clothes for days on end, and an unhealthy sheen of perspiration clung to his brow, even in the chill November air. More alarming than his physical decline were the unsettling phenomena that began to emanate from the Atwood house. Late at night, I often detected a faint humming or vibration that seemed to thrum through the ground itself. setting my teeth on edge. On 2 separate nights, a flash of light caught my attention, an ephemeral glow through the chinks of his cellar door and basement windows, a light of no hue I could properly name, a queer violet-blue luminescence that shimmered and was gone almost before I could be certain it was real. Accompanying it was a low, resonant drone, as if from a distant wind or enormous beehive, that faded after a few minutes. Each time I debated whether to rush over and knock, but an instinctive dread rooted me in place, heart pounding, until the night grew silent once more. I was not the only one to notice odd goings-on. Mrs. O'Leary, an elderly widow living across the way, remarked to me in passing that she had heard strange animals prowling in our yards at night, scratching at the soil and yowling in an uncanny fashion. She wondered if perhaps a rabid dog or pack of coyotes had come down from the hills. I comforted her with a non-committal remark, but privately I harbored my own dark suspicions. On examining the ground near the fence separating my property from Atwood's, I indeed found the earth disturbed, shrubs trampled, and deep gouges in the soil not unlike claw marks. Yet they did not resemble the tracks of any known animal of our region. Their pattern was erratic, almost as if whatever made them had too many limbs, or moved by slithering. I covered these up with fallen leaves, not wishing to alarm the neighbors, or confront the implication that something might have slithered out of that portal and into our world. Sleep became an increasingly scarce commodity for me. Whenever I managed to drift off, nightmares ensnared my mind. Nightmares of that archway yawning open like a ravenous maw. I dreamed I was back in that stone chamber, but this time the darkness within the arch was not still. It seethed and churned like a living thing. In the dream I sensed something on the other side, an intelligence vast and cold, regarding me with malice or hunger. I would wake in terror, drenched in sweat, the echo of an alien whisper fading from my ears. More than once I found myself standing at my bedroom window in the dead of night, drawn by some compulsion to gaze at the Atwood house, half expecting to see monstrous shapes capering in the moonlight. Always there was nothing, only the silent yard, the swaying trees, and the looming silhouette of that accursed house wherein the only stirrings were the faint flickers of light beneath the ground and the barely perceptible vibrations that kept me on edge. Increasingly concerned, I resolved to check in on Atwood directly, despite his withdrawn state. One gray evening I rapped on his front door, under the pretense of bringing over a thermos of hot soup, for the weather had grown bitter, and I suspected he was not eating properly. Initially there was no answer, and I feared he might be lying collapsed within. But just as I was about to force the issue, I heard the latch turn. Atwood opened the door a mere hand's breadth and peered out. The sight of him shocked me. His eyes were sunken and ringed with dark hollows, pupils oddly dilated. A foul odor wafted out, an earthy, sweet sour scent, like decay mixed with ozone. I stammered a greeting and offered the soup. His gaze darted behind me suspiciously before he snatched the thermos with a hand that was visibly shaking. I thank you," he croaked, voice rasping as if disused. "But you should not have come. I am terribly occupied. Please, do not worry yourself on my account." He moved as though to shut the door, but I pressed gently, yet firmly. "Harold, please," I implored, using his given name for the first time. "I can see that you're unwell. Whatever you found down there, it's not worth your health or your sanity. Let me help you. Perhaps we could go to the university. Find experts who..." At my mention of outside help, his face contorted with unexpected fury. For a heartbeat I thought he might fly at me in violence. His lips drew back in a sneer that seemed utterly out of character, almost feral, and I caught a glimpse of teeth gritted unnaturally. Then just as quickly he recoiled and slammed the door, nearly catching my fingers. Through the wood, I heard him shout hoarsely, "Leave me be! It's mine to deal with! Mine!" The possessive, almost inhuman tone of that last word froze my blood. Stunned and deeply alarmed, I retreated, hearing him engage the lock behind me. That brief exchange confirmed what I had feared. Mr. Atwood, was losing himself to whatever influence emanated from that portal. The man who had politely shared tea and ideas with me was now little more than a paranoid husk, jealously guarding his terrible secret. As I walked back to my house in the dim twilight, I fought a rising sense of panic. Rational thought struggled against the tide of dread. Perhaps he was merely ill, feverish, and my overwrought imagination was painting his outburst as more sinister than it truly was. Yes, the logical side of me argued. He might simply be succumbing to some infection or malady, contracted in that ancient tomb-like space below his cellar. Those carvings could harbor mold or spores causing hallucinations or sickness. His strange behavior might yet have a medical cause. And yet, try as I might to seize upon a benign explanation, I could not forget the sight of those cryptic symbols, the impossible dimensions of that chamber, and the void that swallowed the light, nor the claw marks in the soil and the nightmares that whispered of alien stars. Something unnatural had entered our lives when we opened that hatch, and it was tightening its grip on Harold Atwood's very soul. With a heavy heart, I latched my own doors and windows that night, as if physical barriers could fend off the intangible pall that had settled over our little corner of Arkham. I began to entertain grim possibilities. Should Atwood's condition worsen, whom could I turn to? The local doctor? The police? Neither would believe a tale of portals and presences. They would assume my friend had simply gone insane, or delved into dangerous occult practices, a possibility not entirely untrue. And what of my own role? I had been a witness, even a participant, in opening a door that should have stayed shut. The burden of responsibility weighed upon me, as did an overwhelming sense of isolation. There was no one I dared confide in. Thus the stage was set for the next act of this quiet horror. Unbeknownst to me at that time, the boundary between our world and that other realm was growing thinner by the day, and the true extent of Atwood's transformation and the powers he had awakened would soon be revealed in full, shattering any last hopes of a natural explanation. It was a bitter cold night in early December when the situation escalated from eerie portents to immediate peril. I had not seen Atwood in days, and an unnatural quiet seemed to hang over his property. Even the stray cats that prowled the alleys kept a wide berth of that house now. A part of me hoped he had taken ill, and in desperation, gone to seek help in town or at the university. Anything to remove him from the influence of that cursed portal. But such hopeful theories were shattered on the night I awoke to the sound of a horrified scream carried on the wind. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. The scream, unmistakably Atwood's voice, had come from the direction of his house. It was not repeated, but in its wake a new sound arose, a low, droning chant or moan, too deep to be Atwood's throat, as if a chorus of distant voices spoke in unison. Every fiber of my being quailed, yet I could not ignore what I heard. Throwing on my overcoat and grabbing the revolver I kept in a drawer, a relic from my father rarely touched, I rushed out into the frigid night. The sky was moonless, overcast by swift-moving clouds. No light shone from Atwood's windows, but as I crept closer, I saw an unearthly radiance leaking from the edges of the storm cellar doors on the side of the house, the exterior entrance to the basement. A pulsating glow of that same unnatural violet hue throbbed there, visible in thin slats. The air itself vibrated with a subsonic hum that set my hairs on end. Summoning every ounce of courage, I unlatched the storm doors as quietly as I could. They swung open without much protest, perhaps left ajar in haste, and I descended the short staircase into the basement, lantern and pistol in hand. The sight that greeted me in the cellar proper was like a tableau from insanity. The floorboards he had removed now gaped wide, revealing the open stone hatch and the deeper stair beyond. But it was what emanated from that black aperture that froze me in place. A column of shimmering light, colors shifting between purples, blues, and sickly greens, poured up from the depths below, as if the aurora borealis had erupted underground. Within that glow, motes of dust or energy swirled in patterns that defied logic, coalescing and dissipating in time to the droning chant that filled the air. I crept to the edge of the hole and peered down. The chamber below was awash in eldritch light. I could see the archway clearly from above. It was open. There was no mistaking it now. The void inside was no longer absolute. It had taken on a dimensional depth. Through it I glimpsed a vista that should not exist, a sky of swirling alien stars above a jagged landscape. The perspective was warped, as if I looked through a fisheye lens at an impossible scene. Towering shapes loomed in that otherworldly place. Whether mountains or titanic structures, I could not tell, but their geometry was abnormal, twisting the eye. Before the arch stood Harold Atwood, arms upraised in supplication. He was facing the portal, his back to me. His posture was unnaturally rigid, and he was bathed in the unearthly glow. He appeared smaller, diminished, like a frail shadow of himself. Yet his voice, if it was truly his, rang out loudly in a guttural litany of blasphemous syllables that made my skin crawl. It was a language or incantation not meant for human tongues. Each phrase that spilled forth seemed to claw at the edges of my sanity. The dreadful chorus I had heard was emanating from the portal itself, a responding chant from beyond, echoing Atwood's invocation in antiphonal resonance. As I watched in mounting horror, something in the portal shifted. A shape was forming within that starry void, an outline bulging forward through the archway. It was as if the darkness congealed into a semi-transparent veil and pressed forward. I could discern hints of form, a suggestion of limbs or appendages, grotesquely jointed, and a glint of eyes, multiple eyes glimmering like burning coals set into an indescribable visage. The sight was so overwhelming that I nearly cried out. My hands, slick with sweat despite the chill, tightened on the revolver. At that moment, Atwood must have sensed my presence, or perhaps the thing beyond the gate did, for he turned his head sharply and spotted me above. His face, dear God, I shall never forget that face. His features were contorted into a mask of ecstasy and agony combined, eyes wide and glowing with the reflection of alien light. His skin had taken on a deathly pallor, stretched taut over his skull. He bared his teeth in a grimace that was half snarl, half plea. "You should not be here," he howled over the droning noise, but his voice was discordant, as if mingled with another deeper timbre that spoke through him. "It's too late. He comes. The gateway opens." As he shrieked, I saw his fingers curled like claws, and I realized with a surge of terror that he was no longer entirely sane, if any part of Harold Atwood truly remained at all. The thing beyond the arch pushed further, a gelatinous, nightmarish bulk straining at the threshold between worlds. A single appendage, long, sinuous like the arm of a starfish, yet tipped with grasping digits, slipped through, probing the air. In that instant, a jolt of resolve, or pure panic, shot through me. I raised my revolver, hand shaking, and fired blindly at the writhing appendage. The gunshot cracked like thunder in the confined space. I cannot be sure if my bullet found its mark on that unearthly appendage, for how can lead affect what is perhaps not fully material? But the immediate result was chaos. The portal flared with blinding light, and a sound like a colossal sigh or roar gusted forth. I was blown backwards by a forceful blast of wind or energy, toppling onto the basement floor. Dust and debris swirled around me as the very foundation of the house quaked. From below came a cacophony. The alien chorus rose to an enraged, cacodemoniacal wail, and I heard Atwood scream, not in pain this time, but in fury. Peering back down, half blinded by the swirling dust and prismatic lights, I saw that appendage had recoiled back through the arch. Atwood was staggering, one hand pressed to his head as though battling a migraine or an inner voice. "Why did you interfere?" He shrieked up at me, spittle flying from his lips. His voice warbled between registers, mortal and monstrous. Before I could respond or decide what to do next, the lantern I had set down was extinguished by the gale from below, plunging the basement into near darkness save the hellish glow from the crypt. In the confusion, I lost sight of Atwood. Fearing he might come after me, or worse, that the entity might yet break through. I scrambled to my feet and fled out of the way I had come, nearly tripping on the cellar stairs in my haste. As I burst back into the merciful cold air outside, the storm doors clanged shut behind me with a violence born of the unnatural wind. Then came an eerie silence. The glow subsided, winked out in the space of a few heartbeats. The night was dark once more. Only the distant howl of wind through the bare trees and my own ragged breathing broke the quiet. I stood there trembling violently, realizing the enormity of what I had witnessed. The gateway had been open, and something had begun to cross. Had my rash action halted it, or merely postponed the inevitable? And what of Atwood? Was he even still human enough to be called Atwood? Or had he become a vessel for that cosmic interloper? I thought of those eyes glaring at me, and the alien voice echoing in his throat, and I feared the answer. Stumbling back to my house, I bolted the door and slid to the floor in a state of shock. I spent the remaining hours before dawn, huddled with the revolver clutched tight, ears straining for any sign that my neighbor's house still harbored active horror. None came. Only then did I allow myself to weep, tears of terror, of despair, and of guilt. For I realized that by firing upon that thing, I may have only enraged it, and worse, I had likely destroyed the last vestiges of trust between Harold and myself. If he was not entirely lost before, he surely was now, bound inextricably to whatever dwelled beyond that threshold. There would be no plea for help from the authorities or professors after this. The time for half measures and hopeful denial was over. I now knew with dreadful certainty that the gateway had to be closed permanently, and the influence from beyond severed, no matter the cost. And in my heart, I knew what that cost must be. Morning found me in a state of grim resolve. Haggard and unsteady, I peered out from behind my curtains at the forlorn shape of Atwood's house. It stood silent, its windows dark, and shuddered against the feeble winter sun. No telling what transpired inside during the remaining night hours after my flight. Perhaps the thing beyond had withdrawn for now, licking its wounds, or perhaps it waited with patient malice for another opportunity. Of Atwood himself there was no sign. Not a curtain stirred, not a footprint in the light dusting of the snow on the path. All that day I wrestled with my conscience and my fear. I knew that if I did nothing, it was only a matter of time before the horrors I had witnessed would resume, perhaps with catastrophic success. Atwood would try again to fully open the gateway. Of that I had no doubt. He was beyond any earthly appeal to reason or morality now, enthralled to that alien will. The memory of his wild eyes and the unearthly voice that had issued from his throat turned my stomach. Could any part of my neighbor be saved, or was he already effectively lost? I paced my study for hours, the revolver close at hand, as if expecting an assault at any moment. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind through the eaves set my nerves on edge. In my mind, I revisited the literature of the macabre and occult I had read in years past, half-remembered passages from forbidden tomes and folklore about possession and exorcism. Some spoke of severing the binding link between our world and the beyond by destroying the conduit or those who had opened it. In my youth I had regarded such accounts as superstitious allegory. Now, they seemed a desperately narrow guide to action. As dusk fell, my decision was made. It was a decision as irrevocable as it was abhorrent. I would put an end to Harold Atwood's life. Murder or mercy, label it how one will, I convinced myself it was the only recourse to avert a far greater horror. If any humanity remained in him, it was submerged under an evil that would devour countless others. Better one life end than many, I reasoned, though my soul quailed at the thought of the deed. I prepared as best I could. Besides my revolver, I armed myself with a long butcher's knife strapped to my belt and grabbed an old axe handle for good measure. I donned dark woolen clothes and gloves, partly against the cold and partly to muffle my presence. Before leaving, I penned a short letter, part confession, part apology, addressed to whomsoever might find it, detailing that I acted to stop an unspeakable evil should I fail to return. That letter lies now beside these pages, a futile charm against the consequences of what I must do. Stepping out into the moonlit night, I felt an eerie calm settle over me, as if some grim providence guided my steps. The world was unnaturally still, even the wind had died. Only the crunch of my boots in the snow marked my passage to the neighboring yard. I silently prayed to a God in whom I only half believed, that I might be spared from having to harm a friend, that by some miracle Atwood would come to his senses at that last instant. But deep down, I harbored no illusions. The back door was unlocked, hanging ajar. Atwood was likely expecting me, or something worse, and had ceased to care about mundane precautions. I slipped inside, ears straining. The house was dark and bitterly cold, as if no fire had warmed it for days. The faint odor of decay and ozone still lingered, stronger now. With painstaking quiet, I navigated by memory through the kitchen and hall toward the basement stairs. A dim glow, pulsing and sickly, emanated from below. He was there, in the bowels of the earth, communing again with that abomination. Each step down those wooden stairs felt like a descent into hell. Halfway down, I heard a low murmuring from the chamber beneath the open hatch, a rhythmic chanting, quieter than the night before, but more focused, more insidious. I recognized Atwood's voice intermingled with a deeper resonance that made my skin crawl. The words were unintelligible, yet had a cadence that set my heart to racing. My lantern was unlit. I dared not announce my approach with light, so I moved in darkness, guided by the hellish violet effulgence that glowed upward from the depths. At the foot of the stairs, I steadied myself with a deep breath. The open pit yawned a few paces away, its edges shimmering with that otherworldly radiance. From below, the chanting droned on. He hadn't heard me yet, it seemed. Tightening my grip on the pistol, I carefully peered over the rim and down into the chamber. Atwood stood once more before the archway, swaying on his feet as he conducted that dreadful rite. The portal swirled with a sullen energy. It had not yet fully opened to the clarity of the previous night, but I could see tendrils of darkness unfurling like slick smoke, probing at the threshold. The chamber beyond the arch flickered in and out of view, glimpses of an alien horizon shimmering as if seen through black water. I descended the stone steps quietly, one at a time, keeping the pistol aimed. Each heartbeat thundered in my ears. When I reached the bottom, Atwood suddenly went silent. Whether he heard my soft footfalls or sensed the mortal intent behind them, I cannot say. He did not turn around immediately, but I saw his shoulders stiffen. "Harold!" I called out, my voice echoing off the curved walls. I hoped, perhaps foolishly, to reach some remnant of the man within that husk. "Harold, it ends here. You must stop this. I will stop this." My words faltered as he began to pivot to face me. The light from the portal illuminated him fully, and I suppressed a gasp. In the scant few days since I had last seen him clearly, he had deteriorated hideously. His hair hung in lank, thinning clumps, and his cheeks were sunken almost to the bone. His eyes, however, burned with unnatural fervor. Worse, I now beheld his hands, extended toward me in a placating or beseeching gesture. They were mottled with some dark stain, the fingers elongated beyond normal human proportion, their joints knotted and wrong. They quivered in the air as if hungry to grasp. "You should not have come," he rasped. His voice was his, but underneath it ran that sepulchral undertone, like an echo from a bottomless well. His lips curled into a rueful facsimile of a smile. "I gave you a chance to leave well enough alone." Behind him, the portal pulsed more rapidly, as though matching the quickening of my heart. I caught glimpses of unnatural movement beyond, shadows shifting among those titanic shapes in the other realm, reacting to our confrontation. "Harold, listen to me," I tried once more, edging sideways to put some distance between him and the arch, and to angle for a clearer shot. "This thing is using you. It will destroy you, destroy all of us. You've seen what lies beyond. You know this is wrong. Please, for God's sake, step away from it. Help me close it, before it's too late." At my words, something like a sob or a laugh burst from him. He clutched his head with those misshapen hands. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed a war of emotions on his ravaged face. Pain, fear, defiance. "Too late, too late," he mumbled. "The gateway is mine now. He has shown me the truths of the universe. I cannot turn back. Don't you see? I must open the way. It's the only way for him to set me free." His eyes rolled upward, revealing bloodshot whites, and from his mouth a string of syllables poured forth, half in English, half in that infernal tongue. "Yog-Sothoth, the key, the key. Ia, Ia, unlock the gate." With that final mad cry, Harold Atwood lunged at me, moving with a speed and ferocity that bellied his frail form. I fired the revolver point blank. The muzzle flash lit the chamber as thunder cracked, and a red blossoming stain appeared on Atwood's torso. He stumbled but did not fall. A scream erupted from his throat. No human sound, but a shrill, ululating wail that reverberated from the stone. He came at me again, arms outstretched. In the confined space, he struck me before I could fire a second shot, his clawing fingers raking across my shoulder and knocking the gun from my grasp. We fell to the damp floor in a tangle. His strength was astonishing. He bore down on me, fingers scrabbling from my neck. I smelled his breath, reeking of decay, and saw up close the horror of his face, veins black and pulsing at the temples, spittle flying from the cracked lips that snarled in both rage and agony. I managed to twist aside enough to get a hand on the knife at my belt. As stars danced in my vision from his tightening grip on my throat, I yanked the blade free and drove it desperately into his side. Atwood howled, a ghastly sound that rose octaves beyond human range. Black ichor, shockingly cold, welled from the wound and splashed my hands. The substance was far too dark and viscous to be normal blood. He recoiled and I sucked in air, coughing. I wrenched free from under him as he writhed, and saw in my periphery that the portal was flashing chaotically, as if agitated by the struggle. The entire chamber trembled. Bits of dust and grit rained down from the ceiling. I scrambled for the revolver, which had skittered a few feet away. Atwood was already recovering, rising to his knees despite the knife that still jutted from his side. His eyes, God, those eyes, had taken on a glassy, vacant look, as though the being beyond peered through them directly now. He began to croak guttural words once more, and the portal flared in response. A shapeless shadow burgeoned within it, pressing close to the threshold, perhaps drawn by the scent of blood or the prospect of a gateway about to be fully breached. Seizing the pistol, I cocked the hammer and fired again, this time aiming for his head. The report was deafening. Atwood's forehead blossomed red, and he snapped backward, collapsing against the stone archway. For a second, I dared hope that would be the end. But in a final spasm of unnatural vitality, he seized the sides of the arch as if to hold himself upright. His body convulsed, and he fixed me with one last look, an expression not of the man I knew, but of the unfathomable other that had devoured him from within. His mouth moved, and in a gurgling, choking voice not entirely his own, he spat. "Foolish creature, you have won nothing. The gate will open elsewhere the dark comes." With that, Harold Atwood collapsed forward. His body fell half inside the archway's threshold, and as it did, a horrific shudder ran through the structure. The archway's carved symbols flared brightly and then fissured with loud cracks. A shrill hiss like steam escaping filled the air as the darkness within the portal began to collapse in on itself. I staggered back, watching in morbid fascination and relief. The archway crumbled, stone chunks falling away and striking the ground. As Atwood's lifeless form slid fully onto the chamber floor, the void beyond snapped shut with a concussive whoosh. A blast of nauseating air rushed out, extinguishing every trace of the uncanny light. The sudden dark and silence that followed was more terrifying, in its own way, than the cacophony that preceded it. I stood there in the pitch-black tomb, ears ringing, scarcely able to breathe. The only sound was my own gasping sob and the drip of some moisture from the cracked ceiling. By touch I found my lantern and struck a match with trembling fingers. In its feeble glow, I beheld the ruin of that subterranean room. The freestanding arch lay toppled in pieces. The carvings along the walls were marred with fractures, and Harold Atwood's body lay motionless on the uneven stone floor, face mercifully turned away. A pool of inky blood spread from beneath him, reflecting the lantern light in dull glints. It was over. The gateway was closed. The horror, at least for now, was stopped. In the flicker of the lantern, I felt a wave of conflicting emotion crash over me. Sorrow, disgust, profound relief, and a creeping guilt. I had killed a man who months ago had been my friend and intellectual companion, yet that man had long since ceased to exist, consumed by a cosmic malevolence. I told myself this over and over to ward off the nausea and self-loathing that threatened to well up. I knew I could not linger. The structure of the chamber seemed compromised. A deep rumble emanated from somewhere below, hinting that a collapse could yet occur. With a final, mournful glance at Atwood's corpse, I staggered up the spiral stairs, pausing only once in the cellar above to heave the heavy stone slab back over the gaping hole. My arms felt like lead, but adrenaline lent me strength, and I managed to cover the trap door, sealing the crypt once more as it had been sealed for untold years. A faint, muffled crash sounded from beneath just as I slid the slab into place. Perhaps the collapse of part of the chamber, entombing forever the arch and the body. Emerging into the night air, I sucked in deep lungfuls of it. The stars had come out, cold and indifferent to the blood and tragedy below. I realized I was still clutching the revolver, and hastily shoved it into my coat pocket. Streaked with grime and gore, I made my way back to my house, each step a monumental effort now that the frenzy of action was ebbing. The enormity of what had happened, and what I had done, settled onto my shoulders like a leaden shroud. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I sit in the dim confines of a room not my own, Arkham Sanitarium to be precise, writing this final account by the flicker of a lonely lamp. As I scratch these words onto paper, I often pause and listen, half expecting to hear that accursed hum, or a whisper from the dark. Mercifully, there is only the distant sound of an orderly making rounds, and the steady tick of a hall clock, reminding me that time still flows in this world. In the immediate aftermath of that night, events passed in a blur. Neighbors had heard the gunshots and the strange commotion. By dawn, authorities were swarming the Atwood property and my own. I remember being found in my study, still wearing my blood-stained coat, staring emptily at nothing. I did not resist when they took the revolver from my pocket and led me away for questioning. What could I possibly say that would make sense to them? I tried, of course. In my shock and exhaustion, I babbled the truth as I knew it. Wild tales of portals and otherworldly creatures, of my neighbor's transformation, and the battle beneath the earth. The detectives exchanged glances of pity and disbelief. No trace was found of Harold Atwood, only the wreckage in his cellar, a partially collapsed floor and peculiar scorch marks on the stones. They chalked it up to an explosion or structural failure. With no body, the official conclusion was that Mr. Atwood perished in an underground gas leak accident, an explanation I will not contest, absurd as it is. As for me, I was deemed to be in a state of shock and delirium. Perhaps it was a small blessing that my ravings were interpreted as the product of a broken mind. Better a madman than a murderer in the eyes of the law. My few friends in town, knowing my gentle disposition and scholarly bent, argued I had suffered a nervous collapse. It was not difficult to persuade the authorities that I should be remanded to psychiatric care rather than prison. In truth, either place would be a kind of jail. But at least here in the sanitarium I have the solitude to set my thoughts in order and commit this narrative to paper, however futile that exercise may be. They have me on sedatives now. The doctors assure me that with rest and therapy I may recover from my hallucinations. I nod and say what they want to hear, but inside I know there is no cure for the knowledge I carry. The only sanity I have is in knowing that what I experienced was real, no matter how the world may deny it. I recall every detail with awful clarity, the smell of that otherworldly air, the sound of Atwood's final gasp, the sickly glow of the portal as it crumbled. These memories are etched in my mind, sharp as the carvings on that ancient arch. Do I regret my action? Each day I grapple with that question. In the stillness of the night, when the lamplight throws long shadows that dance on the walls, I sometimes second-guess. I see Harold's face as it was when we first spoke as neighbors, courteous, curious, human, and I am seized by a heartbreaking sorrow. Could I have saved him without resorting to bloodshed? Was there a fragment of his soul left crying for help that I failed to hear? These doubts gnaw at me, but then I recall the immensity of the threat that loomed behind his eyes in those final moments. I think of the slithering appendage groping through the gate, of the voices chanting from the abyss. I remind myself that, had I faltered, a tide of cosmic darkness might have spilled into our world unchecked. Yes, I struck down a man, but in doing so, perhaps I struck down something far worse that had consumed him. And what of that far worse? Though the portal is closed and the archway destroyed, I cannot escape the dread that seeps through my dreams. I feel at times as if a gaze still lingers on me from beyond, a consciousness vast and malignant that noticed our little corner of the cosmos because of Harold Atwood's folly. In nightmares I see 1,000 eyes blinking open in the void, fixing upon me in seething hatred. I hear a distant refrain, like a cosmic lament, echoing the last words the things spoke through Harold. The gate will open elsewhere. The dark comes. I wake from these nightmares with a stifled scream. The orderlies rush in, and the doctors increase the dose of my sleeping draught. But no tincture can banish the existential chill these words imprint on my soul. In calmer moments, I try to convince myself that these are merely the ghosts of trauma, not literal portents. After all, I am a tiny speck in an uncaring universe. Why would such incomprehensible entities trouble themselves further with me now that their local pawn is gone? Perhaps they have turned their gaze to some other distant world or another unlucky mortal's mind. The thought is almost comforting that I might be beneath their notice, and yet, in the interminable twilight of this sanitarium, I often catch myself listening, straining to detect some faint note of that otherworldly drone beyond the range of human hearing, half expecting a rip in the fabric of reality to yawn open once more before me. I know that my life, whatever remains of it, will never return to the quiet routine of before. Even if I am declared sane and released, the knowledge of humanity's fragility in the face of cosmic horrors is a burden I must bear alone. I have peered behind the veil and cannot unsee the insignificance of our existence. We are but insects crawling on the skin of a tiny world, blissfully ignorant for the most part of the predators that skitter in the infinite night beyond. Perhaps it is better that the world deems me mad, for sanity, by its common definition, means ignorance of such truths. To any who read this document, if indeed anyone beyond myself ever will, I offer both a warning and a plea. The warning: there are doors that ought never be opened, knowledge that can rot the mind and soul. Should you ever find, in some forgotten cellar or dusty attic, a hint of paths to realms beyond, leave it be. I beg you, for the sake of your own life and all lives, seal it away and let the sleeping cosmic darkness lie. Curiosity may invite horrors beyond imagination. And my plea: if ever the day comes when darkness I strove to hold back manages to find another gateway into our world, remember my story. Remember that one man, flawed and fearful though he was, found the courage to stand against that darkness, however meager his power. We may be insignificant in the grand scheme, but as long as we have the will, we are not entirely powerless. If the nameless gateway opens again, let those who witness it not waste time in denial or hesitation. Act. Bind it, break it, or if you must, destroy its heralds without pity or remorse. I pray my violent deed has bought us time, perhaps years, perhaps centuries, of peace in which that which lies beyond will reconsider or retreat. But even as I pray, I cannot truly hope. The cosmos is vast and filled with terrors, and we stand on its fringes, ever at risk of being noticed. So I end this manuscript with a heavy heart and a soul forever changed. Outside the barred window of my room, the winter sky is clear. The stars glitter icily, indifferent sentinels of the void. Among them may lurk shapes and intelligences that once brushed near our reality in the cellar of a quiet scholar's house. I do not curse those stars for what they contain. No, for they were there long before we apes first gained the temerity to lift our gaze upward. Rather, I shudder at our own audacity in seeking what lies beyond them. I shall seal these pages now, and hide them among my personal effects, unsure if they will ever be read by sane eyes. Perhaps they will be dismissed as the elaborate delusions of a broken mind. Perhaps that is for the best. Yet I know what I know. I did what I had to do. And as I conclude this harrowing chronicle, I find a strange calm washing over me. The last ink strokes of my pen feel like the closing of a door, one that I pray will never again be pried open. The womb of the woods. In the shadow of the Appalachian Mountains, at the edge of a dying West Virginia mining town, Lila and Caleb lived in the quiet agony of longing. Year after year, their modest home remained void of the laughter of children. Miscarriages, doctors said softly. Fate, murmured the well-meaning townsfolk. But in Lila's heart bloomed a desperation so profound, it ached like a living thing. Caleb watched helplessly as each loss hollowed his wife's eyes a little more, etched grief into her once bright face. He too felt the emptiness gnawing at his soul, a silent house filled only with the echoes of hopes that had withered in the womb. One autumn evening, as a chill wind rattled the bare branches of the forest beyond their yard, Lila returned from the market with an anxious glow in her eyes. She spoke in a hushed voice of a woman named Agnes, a reclusive old midwife who lived in a cabin at the far fringe of Black Hollow Wood. The locals whispered that Agnes had ways, old remedies and arcane wisdom beyond the ken of modern medicine. Some called her a witch in fearful murmurs, but others swore that desperate couples left her home with cradles soon filled. Caleb felt a shiver, recalling half-remembered tales of strange lights in those woods. But Lila's trembling plea silenced his doubts. Their years of prayers and tears had led them here. If there was even a glimmer of hope, how could they turn it away? That very night, under a gibbous moon obscured by ragged clouds, they ventured down an overgrown path into the woods. The air itself seemed to thicken around them with each step. Gnarled trees loomed overhead, their twisted limbs entwining so densely that not a shred of moonlight reached the forest floor. An owl screeched far off, and more than once Caleb thought he saw a movement in the corner of his eye, as if the trees themselves were bending to watch the trespassers. Lila walked ahead with uncanny resolve, a lantern clutched in her hand, its light painting her determined face in flickering amber. At last, nestled in a hollow wreathed in thorns and creeping vines, they found Agnes's cabin. The dwelling was a sagging relic of dark, weathered wood, half swallowed by the encroaching forest. A single window glowed with faint orange light. Caleb felt an immediate urge to flee, his instinct shrieking that this place was wrong, but Lila had already knocked on the heavy door before he could protest. It opened with a drawn-out creak. Agnes stood there, tall and gaunt, with iron-gray hair escaping a black kerchief, and eyes like two pale moons. She regarded them in silence for a moment. In that silence, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then her thin lips curved into a smile that did not reach those pallid eyes. Without a word, Agnes beckoned them inside. The air within was thick with the pungent aroma of dried herbs and a cloying, coppery sweet undertone that made Caleb's stomach lurch. Shadow and light warred in the corners of that one-room cabin. Bundles of unrecognizable dried plants hung from the rafters, and at the center stood a crude altar-like table, strewn with uncanny tokens. Small animal skulls, stones etched with strange symbols, and a bowl that looked to be fashioned from a human cranium. Lila squeezed Caleb's hand as Agnes finally spoke in a voice like wind seeping through a graveyard gate.
"You seek a child,"
the midwife stated softly. It was not a question. Lila nodded, eyes shining. Caleb could only swallow and listen. Agnes's gaze drifted to Lila's midsection, then back to her face.
"I can help you,"
she said, reaching out with a spidery hand to trace a slow circle in the air just above Lila's belly. Lila shuddered as if a jolt of electricity had passed through her.
"But you must promise to follow my counsel exactly."
"We will do anything," Lila whispered, fingers tightening around Caleb's. He felt a faint tremor in her grip. Agnes's smile sharpened.
"Then hear me well. There are rituals older than these hills, older than the name of God, that can open the womb and call forth life. I will prepare the way for you."
She dipped a ladle into a simmering cauldron by the hearth and poured a measure of thick, dark liquid into a clay cup. The brew steamed with a greenish vapor, filling the cabin with a sickly sweet smell of moss and decay. Agnes pressed the cup into Lila's hands.
"Drink this tonic under the full moon, and each month, when the moon is round and heavy in the sky, a blood offering must be made in the forest. This binds the life within to the ancient powers that nurture it."
Caleb felt the hairs on his arms prick up. "Blood offering?" he managed to ask, voice hoarse. "What kind of offering?" Agnes's pale eyes flickered toward him as if surprised he dared speak.
"It need not be large," she said. "A small creature, a rabbit or a hen, life given to honor life promised. But it must be shed willingly by your own hand."
Her gaze bore into Caleb, and he understood she meant his hand. The thought of taking life chilled him, but for Lila's sake, he nodded weakly.
"And one more thing,"
Agnes added, her tone turning stern.
"No matter what you may see or hear, neither of you is to wander into these woods at night or on any other occasion. The forces at work are unpredictable. Stay out of the woods at night until I call you for the birthing. Swear it."
Caleb and Lila exchanged a glance. Lila, clutching the cup, replied, "We swear." Caleb, barely above a whisper, echoed her promise. That night they did as instructed. Under the swollen full moon, Lila choked down the bitter draft behind their house at the forest's edge, while Caleb, heart hammering, slit the throat of a young rooster over flat stone. He averted his eyes as the blood flowed, trying not to retch at the warmth of it on his fingers. Lila, tears on her cheeks but resolve in her eyes, placed her hand in the pooling blood and murmured a prayer Agnes had taught her, words in an older, lilting tongue that felt strange and jagged on her tongue. The air was deathly still as they completed the rite. In the distance, from the darkness among the trees, came a sound, a low sigh of wind or a far-off cry, impossibly human in its lament. The forest seemed to quiver in response to their offering. Caleb pulled Lila close, and they hurried back inside, neither daring to speak of the uncanny echo that had answered their sacrifice. In the weeks that followed, Lila's belly quickened with astonishing swiftness. By the very next morning, she awoke with a ravenous hunger and an unnatural flush to her skin. Within a week, a slight bump was visible. By the second full moon, her pregnancy looked as advanced as 5 or 6 months. The town gossips marveled at the couple's sudden turn of fortune. Lila brushed off their curious questions with a radiant smile, claiming a new herbal remedy had finally done the trick. In private, however, Caleb felt a growing coil of unease around his joy. This was everything they had prayed for, yet the circumstances were undeniably strange. Lila's health was robust, too robust. She never tired, rarely slept, and her eyes gleamed fever-bright with feverish fervor. Sometimes in the deep of night he would wake to find her standing at the bedroom window, gazing toward the moonlit woods behind the house, her silhouette utterly still, as if listening to some distant call. When Lila did sleep, her dreams were troubled. She muttered in that same unknown language from the ritual, sweat beading on her brow. Once she whimpered in terror, and Caleb gently shook her awake. Lila looked at him with wide, glassy eyes. "I saw someone," she confessed in a trembling voice. "A figure standing among the trees, watching me. It had no face. No face at all." He held her. She shivered, murmuring reassurance that it was only a nightmare. But the image of a faceless watcher rooted itself in Caleb's mind. He had heard old campfire tales of such phantoms in these hollows, the white-faced thing that lingers at the edge of the woods, the man with no face who beckons from dark hollows. Stories he'd always laughed off as superstition. Now he wasn't sure what to believe. Thus, at each full moon, they repeated the grim offering. Lila's incantations grew bolder with every sacrifice, and each time the brooding woods responded, the trees seemed to lean in as if listening. Shadows pooled thicker, and more than once Caleb thought he heard something heavy stalking just beyond the lantern's glow. Yet whenever he dared to shine his light, there was nothing there but swaying branches. By the 3rd month, dread had seeped into Caleb's bones. One evening he finally voiced his worries to Lila, haltingly suggesting that perhaps they had invited something into their lives that was not holy, that maybe they should stop now before it was too late. Lila's temper flared with a sudden violence unlike anything he had seen from her before.
"Stop now,"
she hissed, one hand protectively over her swollen belly.
"After all we've done, all we've given, would you have our child taken from us after we've come this far?"
Her eyes flashed with a strange fury, and for a moment in the lantern light of their bedroom, Caleb scarcely recognized her.
"Yes. Agnes warned me there would be doubters, people who don't understand,"
Lila cried, her voice shaking.
"I won't hear it, Caleb. I won't. This is our child, our chance at a family. I will not lose this baby. Do you hear me? Not because of your cowardice."
Chastened and heartbroken to see her so desperate, he relented. They would continue the rituals, for her sake, and for the miracle growing inside her. Caleb reached for her, trying to offer comfort, but she recoiled as if his touch burned. In her eyes danced a fervor he might have named devotion or madness, perhaps both. That night, Lila refused to sleep beside him. She sat in a rocking chair by the cradle they had prepared, humming an old lullaby to her unborn child until Caleb, heartsick and exhausted, drifted into a fitful sleep alone. Yet Caleb could not shake the conviction that something was terribly amiss. In secret, he sought answers elsewhere. Late one afternoon, he paid a visit to Elias Finch, an elderly hermit who had lived in those parts for nearly 90 years, and kept the town's oldest tales. The old man sat hunched on his sagging porch, a quilt over his knees despite the warm day, his milky eyes staring past the tree line. When Caleb haltingly mentioned Agnes and the strange rituals, Elias's spotted hand gripped his wrist with surprising strength.
"Fool boy,"
the elder rasped.
"What have ye and your missus done?"
Elias's voice trembled as he spoke of an old coven of granny women, midwife witches, who once bargained with a monstrous presence in these hills. It was a hungry forest demon, he said, a thing older than the oak and stone, that promised miraculous births, but demanded devotion and blood in return. Elias recounted how in 1910 a desperate couple in a neighboring valley sought such help and did receive a beautiful baby boy, only for the entire family to perish in a mysterious fire before the child's 10th birthday. There were other whispers too, perfect, unblemished babies born over the generations whose families met dreadful and unexplained ends. Every story shared the same dread pattern, a child born by the forest's dark grace, followed by calamity. Caleb's blood ran cold as he realized Agnes's rituals were the very same forbidden rites from those dark tales. He stammered out her name, and Elias's lined face blanched. The old man said Agnes had disappeared into the mountains for many years and returned without aging a day, a sure sign of an unholy pact. The milky-eyed elder fixed Caleb with a look of pity and fear. "You've brought doom to your door," he wheezed. Night had fallen by the time Caleb left Elias's porch, each of the old man's words smoldering in his mind. He found Lila at home already asleep and did not wake her. Through the long midnight hours he lay beside her, eyes open and heart pounding with dread. When the first pale glow of dawn crept through the curtains, Caleb resolved that he would not allow them to fall prey to the forest's curse. The full moon of early spring arrived, fat and golden. Lila's time was near. Though barely half the usual term had passed, she looked ready to burst. Agnes sent word that when night fell they must both come to the woods for the final ritual, the birthing. Caleb held his silence about what he had learned, but he steeled himself to go with Lila, determined to protect her and their child at any cost. Quietly, he slipped a hunting knife into his coat before they departed. Night descended unnaturally dark as they followed Agnes's lead into Black Hollow Wood. A clammy mist seeped between the gnarled trunks as if the earth exhaled a cold breath. Agnes glided ahead, lantern in hand, moving with unnerving nimbleness for an old woman. Lila trailed close behind her, eyes fixed straight ahead, one hand cradling her swollen belly. Caleb came last, every muscle taut with apprehension. The further they ventured, the more the forest seemed to close around them. Towering sycamores and oaks, ancient beyond reckoning, twisted into grotesque shapes overhead. Exposed roots jutted from the earth like gnarled fingers. Not a single nightbird sang, not a cricket chirped. The only sounds were their footfalls on the damp leaves, and Lila's occasional gasp as a contraction rippled through her. At last they entered a small clearing encircled by monolithic stones half sunk into the loam. At its center rose a crude stone altar draped in moldering black cloth and bedecked with offerings of bone and feather. Ensnaring the altar was a tangle of living vines, pulsing as if a heartbeat throbbed within the ground. Agnes guided Lila to climb atop the flat altar stone. Lila obeyed in a daze, reclining on the cloth and staring up at the starless sky where a ring of clouds now obscured the moon. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Labor was upon her, yet she made no scream of pain. Her face was eerily serene, eyes glassy and fixed on the darkness above. Agnes pressed a wickedly sharp knife into Lila's hand.
"For the final offering,"
the midwife whispered, and her voice had a feverish tremor of anticipation. Caleb's heart seized in his chest. Final offering. In that moment, the truth struck him with the force of a hammer blow. Agnes meant for him to be the sacrifice. All the blood offerings had been leading to this. The miracle child required the ultimate price. Before he could react, he felt Agnes's claw-like grip seize his arm with impossible strength.
"Be honored, Father," she hissed almost tenderly. "Your blood shall ensure the child's birth."
Caleb lurched back, but from the shadows between the stones, shapes emerged. Gaunt women in tattered shawls, their eyes reflecting the torchlight like feral animals. 6 of them, ringing him. Cold hands grasped his wrists and shoulders, forcing him to his knees before the altar. "Lila!" he cried out, voice breaking with panic. "Lila, run!" Lila only turned her head weakly toward him. She looked pale, sweating, her pupils huge and black. The knife trembled in her hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's the only way." With a wail of anguish, Lila raised the blade and plunged it into Caleb's chest. The pain was white-hot and all-consuming. Caleb gasped as the world lurched, blood blossoming warm and wet through his shirt. He stared at his wife in disbelief and agony. Lila drew the knife out with shaking hands, and Caleb slumped onto his back on the cold ground. His blood cascaded over the altar stone, spilling into the thirsty earth. Above him, the cloaked women began a low, ululating chant. Agnes raised her arms to the sky, her face alight with dreadful ecstasy as she called out in that ancient tongue. The very air vibrated with power. The circle of stones seemed to shiver. The blood-soaked vines around the altar suddenly writhed to life. With a wet, slithering sound, they snaked outward and coiled around Caleb's twitching limbs. He had no strength to fight them. As his vision swam, he beheld an abomination stirring in the gloom beyond the altar. It was as though the entire forest had grown a singular, malignant form. A colossal silhouette of twisted boughs and coiling tendrils rose up against the darkness. It was neither tree nor beast, but something in between. An eldritch being woven of root and shadow. Dozens of luminous eyes opened across its knotted surface, their pale gaze all fixed upon him. Caleb's mind reeled. The sight was beyond human comprehension, a horror too vast to grasp. He tried to scream, but blood bubbled in his throat. The vines hauled him across the dirt toward the altar. A yawning fissure split open in the earth at the base of the stones. A gaping maw lined with jagged roots dripping with sap-like saliva. The fetid reek of decay and sweet moss poured from that impossible mouth. Caleb's fading heart thundered with primal terror as the tendrils lifted his body over the chasm. In his final moments, through a haze of pain, he understood the ultimate truth. This thing that loomed over them was the ancient god of the wood, and to it, human lives were as insignificant as ants. It devoured and bestowed life with equal indifference, an unfathomable cycle, older than time. He could only gurgle a broken sob as the vines let him drop. The forest god consumed Caleb in one swift, hideous motion. A surge of coiling darkness, a wet crunch, and Caleb was gone, swallowed into the dripping earth. At that very instant, Lila arched her back atop the altar with a cry. A great shudder passed through the clearing as if the woods themselves exhaled. Lila's child slipped from her womb without effort, sliding into Agnes's waiting arms amid a torrent of blood. A weak newborn wail rose into the cold night air. The chanting ceased. The grove fell eerily silent, broken only by the infant's thin cries. The towering silhouette of vines and eyes receded back among the trees, melting into the forest as if it had never been, yet a lingering presence, a heaviness, remained. The circle of midwives dispersed like phantoms, vanishing into the dark. Agnes stood alone at the altar, lifting the newborn gently and wrapping him in Lila's shawl. Lila, half conscious, reached out feebly.
"My baby,"
she whispered. Agnes placed the squalling bundle into Lila's trembling arms. He was a boy, rosy, vigorous, and impossibly perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, not a single blemish or bruise upon him. He quieted almost at once against Lila's breast, his cries subsiding into an oddly alert silence. The child's eyes fluttered open, fixing on Lila. In the wavering torchlight they appeared as 2 lightless pools of obsidian. Lila stared into those eyes, and a splinter of fear pricked her elation. The infant's gaze was unsettlingly steady, unblinking.
"Caleb?"
Lila mumbled, her thoughts fogged and body weak. She cast her eyes about for her husband as if expecting him to be standing nearby. The clearing was empty except for Agnes and the faint copper scent of spilled blood. Reality crashed down upon Lila then, the memory of what she had done and what she had allowed to happen, and she let out a keening wail that echoed through the black trees. When the sun's first rays filtered wanly into the clearing, Lila was found wandering at the forest's edge, barefoot, bloodied, and clutching her newborn to her chest. A group of neighbors on an early morning errand spotted the young woman swaying down the road, and they rushed to her side. Lila's dress was stiff with dried blood, and her eyes were distant and hollow. She mumbled a half-coherent tale of a bear attack in the woods when asked about Caleb's absence. Horrified and sympathetic, the townsfolk hurried Lila and the child to the doctor's house. A quiet funeral was held for Caleb a few days later, though no body was ever recovered from the woods. Lila stood at the graveside in a daze, numb and distant, clutching her flawless, black-eyed baby against her shoulder. The villagers whispered of her tragedy and fragile state of mind, vowing to help the young widow through the dark times ahead. Lila thanked them softly, but in her heart she felt only a yawning emptiness and a creeping dread she dared not name. In the following months she kept to herself as her son grew at an unsettling pace, crawling and then toddling far earlier than any child should. On some moonlit nights, Lila awoke to find him standing in his crib, peering through the bedroom window toward the woods, an angelic smile on his lips that never touched his lightless eyes. Lila tried to pray. She tried to convince herself that the nightmare was over, that her sacrifices had won her a normal life at last. She never again set foot near Black Hollow Wood, yet the forest did not forget her. On certain nights, when the clouds hung oppressively low and the air was thick with the scent of damp rot, she would hear a rustling just beyond her doorstep, as if something heavy and slow was dragging itself through the fallen leaves. In those moments, Lila's blood would run cold, for she knew something waited out there in the darkness. Not for her, perhaps, not yet. It was waiting for him. One cool summer evening, as the boy slept fitfully in her arms, Lila found herself humming a lullaby, the same plaintive tune she had crooned before all the horror unfolded. Her voice cracked as she fought back tears of guilt and grief and love. The baby's eyelids drooped. In that liminal haze between waking and dream, his gaze drifted past her, fixing on the window and the tree line beyond, barely visible against the starry sky. Lila could have sworn that in the depths of her son's dark eyes, a faint light flickered, a reflection of the rising moon, or perhaps a glint of some watchful intelligence, deep and ancient, stirring beyond those onyx pupils. Far beyond the yard, at the threshold of the silent woods, 2 points of light flared briefly and disappeared, like eyes blinking slowly shut. The night was vast and unknowable, the indifferent stars glinting above. Lila held her flawless child close, unaware of the ageless creature that now dwelt behind those innocent eyes, patiently awaiting the next turning of the cycle.